so without Washington, D.C. getting into the way. Doing so will lead to those state agencies efficiently improving our drinking water systems and issuing relevant air, land, and water permits. It also means prioritizing the EPA's attention towards issues that will help Americans in their daily lives. When the EPA focuses on what it does best, it doesn't just benefit the environment, it benefits our economic growth. For example, the agency should prioritize cleaning up brownfields and Superfund sites to facilitate new economic development of those locations, many of those of which are located in rural and distressed areas. I look forward to hearing Congressman Zeldin's plan to build on the work initiated by the first Trump administration, including the EPA, which took the first step to address legacy PFAS contaminants. And as the agency fulfills its obligation under our nation's bedrock environmental laws, the administrator should also take into account the affordability and electric reliability. Recently, the organization responsible for ensuring grid reliability found that more than half of the United States could experience rolling blackouts in the next decade because of the lack of reliable power capacity. Areas at risk and shortages include New England, the Mid-Atlantic, California, the Midwest, and the Great Plains. The reliability risk is due to the projected retirement of dispatchable power plants, compiled with a 15% increase in electricity demand over the next decade. Critically, this demand cannot be met solely with intermittent energy generation. Spiking energy costs and rolling blackouts are an unacceptable fact if the U.S. is to continue as a global leader. Actions that policymakers and regulators take now will determine whether America can thrive in an era with a cleaner environment, energy abundance, lower costs, and economic prosperity, or face it with a path of scarcity, inflation, and stagnation. I support that first option I named and believe our nominee does as well. I have confidence that the EPA under Congressman Zeldin's leadership will focus on the EPA's core mission to protect human health and the environment while acknowledging the critical role the agency plays in our economic and international leadership. In doing so, the EPA can make great progress in addressing key environmental challenges consistent with the authorities that Congress has given the agency. I look forward to discussing these issues with Congressman Zeldin today, and I now recognize our ranking member, Senator Whitehouse, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Three things. First, I'd like to let everyone know that I like the chairman. That's a good start.
That's a good start.
That's a good start. And in that context, I would like to present her as the new chairman this gavel.
Oh, thank you.
It was made in 1956 of wood from the old West Virginia State House.
Oh my God.
Wow. By the McKinley Vocational High School in Wheeling, West Virginia. It was presented to the then governor of West Virginia, Hewlett Smith, who kept it upon his departure. He was term limited out, and that was significant for, among other reasons, that it opened the office to the chairman's father.
It did.
Archmore. Madam Chair.
Thank you.
May you bang it in good health.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you.
Second, we have indeed worked well together. We have together successfully advanced nuclear energy reform. We have together successfully encouraged and expanded carbon capture. And the WRDA and highway bills present big bipartisan opportunities for more work together. I even hope together we can revive permitting reform. So there is plenty of good opportunity. And as I speak of bipartisan matters, let me also welcome Senator Curtis, our newly elected member of this committee on the Republican side. Last, I want to show everyone this map of my home state. The bright green parts are parts that are destined to flood permanently, underwater, lost to the sea in decades ahead. Congressman Zeldin will be familiar with this risk from his home, Suffolk County. Fossil fuel pollution is the cause of that. It will change the map of my state. and it will do us crippling economic damage. As I see it, we've been through 3 eras on climate. First was the era of science, and scientists, our headlights, did their job, predicting accurately what was going to happen. NASA scientists, academic scientists, IPCC scientists, Exxon scientists, they did their job. Next came the era of politics, where it was our job to heed the warnings of science and head off those dangers. We failed badly, and for the worst of all reasons. We succumbed to a massive, deliberate campaign of lies and corruption by the polluters themselves. That failure ushers in now an era of consequences. Consequences we should have headed off, but didn't. It's beginning in creeping, seeping inflation as goods become harder to grow, produce, and ship in upended weather patterns. It's upon us already in forward-looking industries like insurance. Good luck with property insurance in Florida and California. The worst danger is systemic economic crashes. One, widely warned of in economic literature, is the carbon bubble, bursting when the international oil cartel or the massive government subsidies cease propping up fossil fuel, and stranded assets lose all value, and the resulting shock cascades into the global economy. The other, upon us already, is climate risk, making property insurance unaffordable or unavailable, which in turn makes mortgages unavailable, which in turn crashes property values. Remember this map. Before all that land went underwater, it would become uninsurable. And that's still water flooding. Throw in big storms, and there's a whole coastal uninsurability crisis looming. The chief economist for Freddie Mac predicted a coastal property values crash cascading through the economy like the 2008 Great Recession. And that coastal danger is now matched by Western wildfire risk, like we're seeing right now in Los Angeles, launching the same insurance to mortgage to property values collapse. Let's be clear, we are in this perilous place because a campaign of lies and corruption and pollution delivered deliberately and at industrial scale by the fossil fuel industry was accomplished through an armada of paid front groups. And so we're clear, it's not just me warning of significant economic harms ahead. I will circulate to all colleagues, lucky you, this compendium of the published warnings for you and all of your staffs to review. This threat is real. If a sharp-eyed cabin boy on the Titanic had happened that night to see the iceberg ahead, you'd expect him to do whatever he could to fight his way to the captain's table in the fancy dining room and warn of the impending disaster. So please understand that map of my state and the sense of urgency that I feel. I am confident that the chairman would equal me in energy and determination for any similar dangers to her mountain state. And so it is through this lens of urgency that I approach this nomination hearing. President Trump has called climate change a hoax. While running for president, he met with fossil fuel industry executives and told them they should give him $1 billion in exchange for his reversing the rules that protect our air and water and limit the pollution that is driving climate change. And indeed, fossil fuel companies and executives lavished millions and millions of dollars on the Trump campaign and affiliated organizations. These special interests now expect a return on their political investment. They expect a reversal of the already limited protections we have for our air and water. And make no mistake, not only would reversing these protections harm our air, water, public health, and climate, doing so would also cost Americans money, as they would be forced to spend more to fuel their cars, to buy their groceries, to heat and cool their homes and businesses. That's money that would go directly from every hardworking American's wallet into the accounts of billionaire fossil fuel barons and giant oil companies. The question then for Mr. Zeldin here before us as President Trump's nominee to run the Environmental Protection Agency is simple. Will he follow the science and the economics and protect our air, water, and climate? Or will he merely be a rubber stamp for looters and polluters who are setting the Trump agenda? I must say that his role at polluter-funded organizations such as the America First Policy Institute and America First Works his long list of Trump-affiliated consulting clients, and his anti-climate op-eds paid for by dark money organizations do not give me confidence that he will be an honest broker if confirmed to lead EPA. I really want this to work. That is how high the stakes are. I am not here trying to score points. I'm here trying to steer us away from what I see as a calamity ahead. I will therefore be watching closely today to see if Congressman Zeldin is able to differentiate himself in any substantive ways from the polluter agenda and the economic crashes likely to ensue. Thank you, Madam Chair. Here is to a productive relationship in this important committee.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for the gavel. That has great meaning to me. So I very much appreciate. I'm actually from the northern part of the state, so where it was made. So thank you. I'm now going to turn to Senator Barrasso, who is going to be introducing Congressman Zeldin.
Thank you very much, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member, White House, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to be here today to introduce Congressman Lee Zeldin, who has been nominated.
Just to comment a little bit, first of all, you heard at the outset the chair of the committee, Senator Capito from West Virginia, speak to the long tradition on this committee of bipartisanship, and that has certainly been the case, but it's been a strained bipartisanship, to put it mildly, in recent years. And one reason you can probably guess is a big difference in political outlook. You heard her statement. This is a screenshot of her League of Conservation's scorecard for the lifetime and for the most recent year available at LCV, a lifetime score of 17%, 2023 score of 6%, the number of times, that's the percentage she voted pro-environment, according to LCV. And of course, you have a very different picture with Sheldon Whitehouse, 98% lifetime score. 100% in 2023. And I just put this up there at the outset here to talk about the divide that we're unlikely to bridge during this process. I'm going to welcome our guests here in just a moment. But obviously, Lee Zeldin is going to be confirmed. There's no real question about that. And we're not sure, beyond the statements from Democrats, if there will be many fireworks. But I think for those out there watching, look for statements from the Republican side that are less about environmental protection and more about regulatory overreach and the need to restrain the agency, which seem to be the marching orders that Mr. Zeldin has from President-elect Trump. That was what accompanied his introduction to us as the nominee. And on the Democratic side, statements like Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island, who's obviously very concerned about the climate change issues that are in the bullseye of this presidency, to roll back all manner of standards. And here to talk with us, comment on what we're watching unfold here today, are two real experts. Nathan Park is the Associate Legislative Representative at Earth Justice, who's responsible for looking at clean air issues. You have the lead. I think we have your title up to date, but if I don't, Nathan, please correct me. And then he'll be joined by Timothy Whitehouse. Tim Whitehouse is the Executive Director of Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, both great allies of EWG in the trenches, at the barricades, whatever metaphor, wartime you pick. And let me just turn first to you, Tim. As we're looking at the start of this hearing, pretty lots of sentiment to do things together, bipartisan fashion. I was a little dismayed that the bipartisan positions turned out to be on nuclear power and carbon capture. But leaving those issues aside, what are your thoughts as we see this hearing opening up? Senator Barrasso, also with a super low LCV lifetime score, introducing the nominee.
Thank you, Ken. I agree the divide between the Democratic and Republican parties have never been more pronounced than they are now. And I think Senator Whitehouse framed the issue well, and that is, can Lee Zeldin moderate the more extreme views of the Trump administration, or is he really along for the ride? Is he going to implement what Trump and the people around him want, or is he able to exert independent authority and power within the agency.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Nathan, your take, because certainly climate and clean air issues joined at the hip in statute and in regulation, of course, they are right in the bullseye of this presidency. What are your thoughts as this hearing opens?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Ken. And, just in her opening statement, the chair said that, Zeldin is a champion for critical environmental policies. And I just have to laugh a bit at that, because we know, looking at his history in Congress, at every opportunity he voted to cut funding for EPA, he's voted against Clean Air Act protections and other environmental protections. She mentioned something about supporting PFAS. We know that he's voted against PFAS legislation to protect communities. So, like you said, we know that he will be confirmed. What I'm really looking out for is to see, particularly our Democratic champions, are they able to get his, pose questions to him, really make the public health components of all this work, like the Clean Air Act work, pronounced, and really get him on record to show that he is in fact not for supporting a healthy environment and healthy communities.
Yeah, I think we're ready for his opening statement now as a witness.
Thank you, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and all the distinguished members of this committee. It's been an honor to meet with all of you to learn more about your highest priorities. I look forward to working with all senators on this committee, on both sides of the aisle, to tackle the most pressing issues facing our country. I humbly sit before you nominated to serve as the 17th Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. The American people made their voices heard in November, giving President Trump a mandate to lead our nation to prosperity. I'm grateful that the President-elect is giving me the opportunity to lead the EPA at this critical time. Our mission is simple but essential: to protect human health and the environment. We must do everything in our power to harness the greatness of American innovation with the greatness of American conservation and environmental stewardship. We must ensure we are protecting the environment while also protecting our economy. Throughout my life, I've been privileged to hold such titles as Congressman and State Senator and Lieutenant Colonel, but none has meant more to me than husband, son, and father. While one of my identical twin daughters, Ariana, is now back at college, I'm excited to be joined here today by my wife, Diana, and our daughter, Michaela, as well as my mother, Meryl. The American people need leaders who can find common ground to solve the urgent issues we face. I want my daughters, your loved ones, and every child across our country to thrive in a world with clean air, clean water, and boundless opportunity. If confirmed, I pledge to enthusiastically uphold the EPA's mission. I will foster a collaborative culture within the agency, supporting career staff who have dedicated themselves to this mission. I strongly believe we have a moral responsibility to be good stewards of our environment for generations to come. It's been so motivating to see the tremendous talent stepping up to serve in the EPA. I couldn't be more excited to partner with our EPA team nationwide to exceptionally serve the American public. I had the honor of working with many of you when I represented New York's 1st Congressional District. My district on the eastern end of Long Island was unique in that it was almost completely surrounded by water. My constituents took environmental issues very seriously, and I developed a record in Congress fighting hard and with great success advancing their local priorities. I worked across party lines to preserve the Long Island Sound and Plum Island. I supported key legislation that became historic bipartisan success stories, like the Great American Outdoors Act and Senator Sullivan and Whitehouse's Save Our Seas Act to clean up plastics from our oceans. Whether it was leading the fight for Sea Grant, combating PFAS in drinking water, voting for the Lautenberg Chemical Safety Act, or supporting clean energy projects on Long Island, I was proud to do my part to secure these environmental victories. Georgetown University and the Lugar Center consistently ranked me one of the most bipartisan members of Congress And to that end, I joined the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus to focus on tackling the challenges of a changing climate. If confirmed, I want to work with all of you to address the unique environmental issues facing your state. Not only do I want to partner with you, I want to learn from you. I ask you all what a former administrator asked a great chairman of this committee from my home state, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. What advice would you give me as I undertake to lead EPA? I look forward to having this discussion with each of you. The EPA must be better stewards of tax dollars, honor cooperative federalism, and be transparent and accountable to Congress and the public. The American people elected President Trump last November, in part due to serious concerns about upward economic mobility and their struggle to make ends meet. Too many of our fellow Americans are trapped in poverty and desperate for a whole of government approach to give them a hand up. We can and we must protect our precious environment without suffocating the economy. A big part of this will require building private sector collaboration to promote common sense, smart regulation that will allow American innovation to continue to lead the world. If confirmed, under the EPA, with my leadership, we will prioritize compliance as much as possible. I believe in the rule of law, and I want to work with people to ensure they do their part to protect our environment. Success is defined for many, including me, as leaving this world better than we found it. I want every child in this nation, including my daughters and your children, to inherit a world with clean air, clean water, and a thriving economy. This mission must transcend politics, and I look forward to working with all of you to achieve it. I thank you, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and all the members of this committee. I'm eager to answer your questions and discuss the issues facing your constituents.
Thank you. We're now ready to begin with the questioning portion for our witness. Senator Whitehouse and I have agreed to have 2 rounds of 5 minutes for questioning. So let's try to keep our first questions within the 5 minutes if in respect for everybody's time. To begin, this committee has 3 standing yes or no questions that it asks all nominees who appear before the committee. So I want to ask you these 3 questions. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear before this committee or designated members of this committee and other appropriate committees of this Congress to provide information subject to appropriate?
For just a moment, we just heard Mr. Zeldin's straightforward testimony on behalf of himself as the nominee, and we talked a little bit before about the desire for bipartisanship that often is very difficult to actually manage on this committee and others. There was a time when that was far easier, but that's in my rearview mirror back quite a few decades. It's gotten harder and harder. I want to turn to Scott Faber. Your sense of the opening of this hearing. We have a stark divide, which I depicted on LCV scores, between the chair Capito and the ranking member Whitehouse. Just for starters, you see they come down from very different places on the environment. No one is, before this committee, is going to say they're opposed to the environment. Everything we heard from the chair and also from the nominee, Mr. Zeldin, suggests that they'll be very focused on protecting the environment. But it's a different set of definitions. I think when they say clean, healthy environment on the Republican side, often they mean as industry sees it, as that suits the industries that are regulated by the agency. And the rest of us maybe have a different perception. Scott, what are your early takes on this?
Yeah, well, it was certainly encouraging to hear. I want to make sure I get it right. Congressman Zeldin say that he was proud of his work to protect, to address PFAS in drinking water. And indeed, he did twice vote for the PFAS Action Act. And he also voted for the PACT Act, which is some of you know as the Burn Pits bill, the bill that was designed to protect service members who've been exposed to toxic pollutants in their service, and to make sure they get the health care they deserve. But PFAS, which until fairly recently was as nonpartisan as an issue as you can get, has become more partisan, and that will be a big test for Lee Zeldin. In particular, the chair of the committee, Chair Capito, was an early champion for addressing PFAS in drinking water, and worked with Senator Gillibrand from New York to help pass a law to set a deadline for a drinking water standard for PFAS, a limit on how much PFAS can be in our tap water. But since she's become the ranking member and now chair, and since she's joined Senate leadership, she's veered to the right on an issue that is just couldn't be less partisan than toxic chemicals in your tap water.
Yeah.
And so I am worried that even though Congressman Zeldin has voted twice for the PFAS Action Act and just said he's proud of his record on PFAS in drinking water, will be under extraordinary pressure to weaken or even eliminate the standard that will give 100 million people cleaner water.
Yeah, no question. That's going to be one of the hot topics. I hope the committee remains vigilant. I have my concerns that I share with you. Scott Faber's, full disclosure, Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at EWG, and he's been at the forefront of our efforts, and I think the efforts of the community on PFAS pollution. And just to turn back to you, Tim, I threw up a couple of headlines during some of the testimony about from this morning from the New York Times, for example, and more recently or yesterday from E&E News, where the expectation is that Mr. Zeldin's coming in to tear down the agency, to do the business of the president, as the president's announced many times. We've also heard reference to EPA from the imaginary Department of Government Efficiency, which is headed by the imaginary leader of it, Elon Musk. And what is the mood that you pick up? You're very close, obviously. Pierre works very closely with EPA employees, as the name of your organization suggests. What's the mood inside the agency now as we shift from a very pro-environment EPA administrator in Michael Regan and a very pro-environment president in Donald Trump? We've all had differences. I think we've all sued the agency. So it's not that they've gotten, been ignored or given partisan consideration here. We've all been pretty fierce critics when they've done, in our view, the wrong thing. But what overall is you're picking up, Tim, from rank and file members of the EPA staff?
Yeah, I've never seen a level of concern so high. I was an EPA attorney for 10 years. I think EPA employees are used to straddling the partisan divide. The issues they work on are often very controversial. But this is very different. What we're going to see is a wholesale effort to dismantle the federal government, particularly EPA, and to have EPA and other federal agencies work for those that have the most power. And so there's extreme concern, and there's, I think, some level of trauma. And as President-elect nominee for the Office of Management and Budget has said, that is their goal, is to create trauma among the federal workforce.
Right. No question. Nathan, from your contacts on the Hill and elsewhere, what's the mood? My sense is, I keep telling people I'm sharpening my pitchfork so I can get to the barricades on time on the 20th. What is your sense of how people are looking at this incoming administration? It is trepidation, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's not just the incoming administration, it's this Republican trifecta across the government. And so, for myself, my partners, and the folks that we're working with on the Hill, there is a lot of anticipation that it is going to be a flurry of anti-environment legislating, regulating, efforts to repeal all kinds of critical public health protections that we were able to successfully put in place over the past few years. And so, we are preparing as we can. We also know that we are in a very unfriendly environment. And, in this moment, we're looking not only towards the Republicans that are in charge, but we're also, concerned and really trying to work with a lot of the more moderate Democrats and making sure that we can keep the Democrats in line as well and ensure that they understand the public health concerns that are at play here.
Yep, I think that's exactly right. And, he would be if confirmed, and he will be confirmed, he'll be the 17th administrator of EPA. I've known a lot of them. I'm sure the two of you have known at least some of them, and going back many years. And, you really do see a shift, even amongst Republican EPA administrators. The difference between, for example, a Bill Riley and some of the more recent occupants of the EPA administration, administrator's chair, big differences. And I think as you see that shift over time, it's reflected, as you said, Nathan, in the Congress. We could put up the LCV scores for everyone in the Congress, and we would see that stark divide, and more of the LCV scores based on defensive votes, trying to hold back environmental challenges because we're not passing major federal environmental protection laws anymore. Haven't for some time, at least laws that I think the environmental community mostly supports. So it's going to be interesting to see as this committee goes about its business today, if any Republicans actually speak out to questions of protecting the environment versus stopping regulatory overreach and the theme of unleashing American energy production. We are the largest energy producer in the world already. We are producing far more energy than we produced under the first Trump administration, oil and gas in particular. Of course, renewables too, thanks to a lot of the steps that were taken by the Biden administration. But as well, we really don't have any question that will continue, unfortunately, when it comes to carbon pollution. But the fact of the matter is this is being used by the president, who wants energy dominance, as an excuse for eliminating laws and regulations. Nathan, what do you think will be first on the chopping block when it comes to this EPA? Now, we know we'll have the Congressional Review Act issues, and maybe we'll step into that a little bit later, but what is Earth Justice, and then I'll ask you too, Tim, what do you think will be some of the first targets?
Sure. Well, I might get us to step into the Congressional Review Act right now, because that is what we are preparing to defend against pretty immediately. I mean, I know that but for those who are tuning in and maybe are not as familiar, the Congressional Review Act is this, I would say, obscure, statute, but it just gets used more and more these days, and it allows Congress to essentially roll back policies set in place by an administration. It has really not been used for most of the time that it's been on the books until that first Trump administration, where Republicans used it to roll back a handful of Obama-era policies. And from what we know up on the Hill, we know that Republicans are once again getting ready to use the Congressional Review Act to target as many Biden policies as they can to undo a lot of the progress that the Biden administration has made across all the federal agencies. And that goes for EPA as well. For me, in the clean air space, there is luckily some of the major clean air rules, like the mercury air toxic standards, the soot standards that were passed or finalized in the past year of the Biden administration. They fall outside of the window for this Congressional Review Act, look back period for which Congress can roll back some of these regulations. But a really big issue that we are concerned about and are already rallying a coalition of folks to defend against is what's called the once in, always in rule, also known as the reclassification rule. what we also call the poisonous air loophole rule. And it's essentially during the previous Trump administration, they undid a decades-long policy at EPA that requires that certain, a huge sweeping set of sources of some of the most hazardous air pollutants, no longer need to monitor and report and reduce the emissions of these air pollutants. These, some of the worst pollutants like dioxins and mercury and lead. That cause cancer, amongst many other, awful health issues. So they essentially deregulated thousands and thousands of sources of these pollutants. The Biden administration closed that loophole that they created, mostly, not entirely, but they closed it. And our understanding is on the Hill that they are, basically going to get right back into undoing that. So, that's kind of where we are taking our first fight.
Yep, I hear you, and we're watching some of these Congressional Review Act maneuvers ourselves on issues that we care about, and I can assure everyone it's a concern because this is a deliverable for the Republican early on for Republicans if they can pass those resolutions. Tim, your sense of what are the first target zones for this administration coming in to do damage to the agency and the policy?
I think they've broadcasted very, very clearly that it's climate change, environmental justice, enforcement, and the review of new chemicals, which ties into PFAS, which are coming onto the market. We'll also be looking very closely at the executive orders that are issued on day one to see whether there is an effort to shake loose EPA employees. I was very happy to hear the congressman talk about his respect for EPA staff and the professionalism of the staff. But we expect changes to telework. We expect schedules to come in which make the workforce more political. And we expect reorganizations at EPA to be initiated rapidly. And so that will result in significant reductions in EPA's ability to do its work and a loss of staff.
Yeah, I think that's probably where they'll start. Let's cut back to Senator Kramer, a new member of the committee.
State's role in regulating water resources would remain primary if the EPA had jurisdiction over anything defined by the presence of water, unquote. Now, I was tempted to bring the poster, but in previous definitions, as they've gone back and forth, there's one that Sackett was based on, actually, or that would be relevant to Sackett, where the entire state of North Dakota was basically a federal wetland. We're a semi-arid state with badlands and big prairies. Should you be confirmed, it would be really good if the administrator took this decision and the legislative history behind it and start a rulemaking process post-Sackett with the assumption that states have primacy and primary responsibility for water within their states, not the federal government. How do you intend to sort of approach that? Because this post-Sackett WOTUS definition is going to be really, really important.
Yes, Senator. With any rulemaking, as you know, I'm not allowed to prejudge outcomes going in. And it's important that corners aren't cut where durability is sacrificed. Laws are written by Congress, and there are cases that have come out from the Supreme Court that provide the EPA with clear guidance on how we must do our job under the law. It is important that when you're going back to your home state and you're speaking to your farmers, that you are able to, with confidence, be able to explain to them that the federal government is doing our part so that they can define what waters of the U.S. are without them having to go hire an attorney or someone else, pay a lot of money to ensure compliance. So I will make sure that I'm doing my part, that the EPA is honoring the decision of Sackett and any future laws to come out of Congress. That is my commitment to you. And I know that was important when I met with Senator Sullivan as he was speaking about Alaska and wetlands and so many other people on this committee. So I look forward to working with you on that.
You know, that great answer. I appreciate that very much. One of the things that concerns me is when I've heard and realizing with regard to WOTUS, you have two agencies that get involved, the permitting side at the Corps of Engineers and the EPA rulemaking. But one of the things in terms of a durable rule that I heard from some from the previous administration or the current administration was that, well, we're going to create a durable rule. And I think the way to do that is to make sure that while we recognize the law is clear now, the definition's clear, all you have to do is seek a jurisdictional determination from us, the Almighty, and then we'll tell you whether your land meets that definition or not. To which I say, we don't put a police officer on every car. Can we presume that in the very obvious, simple cases that the landowner or the developer already knows the law and doesn't need to seek permission to do what they want to do?
Unfortunately, we face a reality where many farmers don't know whether or not their land, not just farmers, obviously, but a lot of people don't know whether or not their land has waters of the U.S. on it. And I would say that that is a failure on the part of the federal government. You should be able to go to your landowners and they should be able to, with confidence, be able to tell you without having to ask questions whether or not waters of the U.S. are on their property.
Well, thank you for that. I can tell you North Dakota farmers are pretty bright.
This has been a heavily litigated issue over the years. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, and also under USDA jurisdiction, the Swamp Buster provision that restricts subsidies to farmers who improperly drain wetlands. And so the question of what a wetland is, where EPA authority is involved, where it's not, and has been a constant source of tension to provide regulatory relief. Let's go back to Bernie Sanders here, Senator Sanders.
Situation in LA right now. We have seen unprecedented flooding in China, displaced millions of people there. Unprecedented drought in Brazil, Africa, and elsewhere. And in Southern Africa, people are dying because of the drought and their inability to grow crops. Billions of people have been sweltering in Europe and elsewhere in unprecedented heat waves. In the midst of all of that, President-elect Trump has said that climate change is a hoax. You will be, if confirmed, one of the leading spokespeople in this country, representing us throughout the entire world. Do you agree with President-elect Trump that climate change is a hoax?
Well, first off, Senator, it was great to meet with you as well. I believe that climate change is real, as I told you. As far as President Trump goes, the context that I've heard him speak about it was with a criticism of policies that have been acted because of climate change. And I think that he's concerned about the economic costs of some policies where there's a debate and a difference of opinion between parties.
I would respectfully disagree with you. I think he has called it a hoax time and time and time again. And I would just say for the record that, and let me ask you this question, all right? Some of us have used the word existential threat. What we're seeing in LA right now is apocalyptic. And the other terrible weather disturbances, whether in the Midwest of this country, whether in many states that are represented right here, unprecedented floods in my small state of Vermont. We've been hit over and over again in recent years. Our state capital, Montpelier, was underwater recently in a way that we have not seen. Would you describe climate change as an existential threat, meaning that there must be an urgency to get our act together, to address it?
Senator, we must, with urgency, be addressing these issues. And today, as we talk about any way at all that the EPA can do its part to make sure that our air and water are cleaner, healthier,
Staying on one, look, EPA has enormous responsibilities over an enormous number of areas. I'm focusing on picking up what Senator Whitehouse said. I worry very much. Do you have kids?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. I worry. Many of us have kids. We have grandchildren. This is serious stuff. This is beyond politics, my friends. This is the future of humanity. And if we do not get our act together, and that is not just the United States of America, this requires international cooperation. So let me ask you another difficult question. If tomorrow, magically, the United States Congress did all of the right things, that would not be enough. Climate change is a global crisis. It requires the cooperation of China, Russia, Europe, Latin America, etc. Are you prepared to represent the United States aggressively with some of your colleagues in reaching out to countries all over the world to cut carbon emissions?
Senator, it's very important for I, as administrator of EPA, whether traveling to the G7 or the G20 or elsewhere, to be reaching out to these other countries to make sure that there is a pressure on other nations to do their part as well. And it is my job to stay up at night, to lose sleep at night, to make sure that we are making our air and our water cleaner.
All right. I know it's fashionable to be beating up on China. It's good politics. They are now the major carbon polluter in the world. We have historically had that role. We're now number 2. We're not going to solve this crisis without working with China. Are you and hopefully your colleagues, if you are confirmed, prepared to work with China to try to lower carbon emissions?
Senator, on many different issues, it is important not just to be working with nations that we are the strongest aligned with, but to also be in communication with and engaged in dialogue with countries that might be considered competitors and also our greatest adversaries. And right now, China is an adversary in many respects.
Okay. As part of the IRA, had a provision in there for, I believe, $7 billion to lower electric bills for working class people all over this country by helping them install solar panels on their roof. We did it, my wife and I did it in our house. Our electric bill went down by 80%. Problem is many working class, lower income people can't afford the initial cost to install the solar panels. That's what this bill does. Can I have your word right now that you will work with me to make sure that Solar for All program is rapidly and effectively implemented all over the country?
Senator, it is my obligation on this and every other law enacted by Congress that I will follow my obligations under the law. And when it comes to spending money, it is important that I have the ability to sit before you and account for every dollar that's being spent by the EPA. So I know that this is an important priority of you and solar power.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Almost saved by the bell.
That was the fossil fuel industry.
I look forward to working with you on this, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Curtis.
Thank you. And before I begin, just a big thanks to all my colleagues on the committee.
Obviously, I think Mr. Zeldin is acquitting himself quite well. You know, we have a very high bar he would have to meet to match Michael Regan, the current administrator, in terms of commitment and knowledge of environmental issues. Then we have the low bar set by the first Trump administration's first EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, who, as we will recall, had a soundproof booth built in his office so he could communicate with who knows who, we can guess, without being overheard by the pesky EPA staff. He sent his head of security detail, sent him off to pick out his favored hand lotion from the Ritz-Carlton, as I recall. That made his skin softest, I suppose, of all the hand lotions out there. Zeldin's coming across here and I'll turn to Scott Faber on this very quickly. He's coming across as very reasonable, very concerned about the environment and so forth. But we know we have good reason to believe lurking on the other side of this, very civil and reasonable, one might also say moderate presentation, is a pretty savage agenda. Tim alluded to it earlier, from OMB on down, to undo the good work and the capacity of this agency. What's your take on how he's performing?
Well, he certainly it does not have the sweet hints of jasmine that the Ritz-Carlton moisturizer may have had.
It's your favorite too, as I
My-
know. I think we can
I
disclose
think
that now.
everyone can detect that that I spent the $27 to get that particular hint. It's probably more now, but I think he obviously, as someone, as a former member of Congress who's been through a lot of hearings, sat through chaired hearings, chaired subcommittee hearings, seen a lot of witnesses. He's well prepared for this moment, and I can't imagine there'll be any unforced errors. But when you read between the lines, what's clear is that he does not share that sense of urgency that we just saw from Senator Sanders, that sense that we have to use all of the tools in the tool chest if we want to avoid a sort of an existential crisis, if we want to have a habitable planet that our children and grandchildren can enjoy. So I think he missed the mark in that sense, that he's clearly didn't demonstrate certainly to Senator Sanders' satisfaction, and I'm sure probably not to many of your satisfaction, that he gets it, that we have to do everything possible. We have to defend the IRA. We have to make sure we're limiting carbon pollution in every way we can.
Yeah, Tim, how do you? What's your take on him as he's performing there at the witness table?
Yeah, he's performing very well. He's coming across as moderate and thoughtful. The reality, as Scott has mentioned and Ken, you have mentioned, is lurking behind him is a very powerful agenda to deregulate, to let the powerful industries control EPA, and to greatly diminish the effectiveness of the federal workforce. It's kind of like we're moving into an oligarchy or a kleptocracy. And the question is, can he moderate those forces? And that remains to be seen. I think the Trump administration knows that EPA is popular among the American public, and that poll after poll shows that Americans want protection from climate change, they want clean water, and they're concerned about biodiversity loss. So he's straddling those two realms in this hearing, but reality starts next week.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I'll turn to you next, Nathan, but I just wanted to throw in there that, the question of overstepping, or the charge of overstepping, has been leveled, of course, by both sides. That environmentalists, when there's been a pro-environment EPA administrator, they're overstepping. And of course, we've made the case that there's overstepping to deregulate under previous administrations when that's been the case. It certainly was under Trump 1. We saw issue after issue where we either experienced a regulatory rollback, rejecting a ban on, for example, the insecticide chlorpyrifos at the beginning of Trump 1 that had been established by the Obama administration, overturning that, and many other issues, and lots of litigation. Now, the first time around, and I'll ask you this, Nathan, I know you're also applying your trade up on Capitol Hill, but Earth Justice is at the forefront, along with PEER and other organizations, taking agencies to court when they do the wrong thing, or when we need to challenge the pace at which they're doing something. And there was unprecedented levels of litigation against Trump 1. You wouldn't think, to hear Mr. Zeldin testify, and there he is, it seems to be all about the environment, all about collegiality, all about doing the right thing, protecting clean air, clean water, as Trump often says. And there was never a policy to hurt the environment that wasn't introduced as being in the service of cleaner air and cleaner water under Trump 1. But what's your sense of, how much it will take to stop this administration from doing what we know is coming?
Absolutely. Well, what I'll say about Trump 1 and some of the litigation work that we did that came out of that era, nearly 9 out of every 10 cases that we brought against the first Trump administration, we won.
Yeah.
If you look at the past 4 years, we also saw a number of strengthenings of all kinds of environmental protections because of the litigation that we brought against the first Trump administration. We litigated against them for their weak steel mills rule that they put out, taconite plants, lime plants. This is all in the clean air space, but it kind of runs across all the issues that we and I know you all work on. And because of the weak regulations that they put out and the strong environmental laws that we have on the books, we were able to get the courts to agree with us that they didn't go far enough, and that actually EPA must put out new, stronger protections. And then under the Biden administration, we saw those stronger protections put in place. So we have no high hopes for this next go around with the Trump administration. But the power of the law has been on our side, and we're interested to see what comes out of that. I think our strategy remains the same. What is, of course, a bit of a wrench in all of this is that over the past few years at the Supreme Court, we have seen an overturning of some of the longstanding, case law that we depend on to protect some of that. There was just some mention a few moments ago about Sackett versus EPA. We also saw the rulings in West Virginia versus EPA, and then this past summer the Loper-Bright case that overturned Chevron deference. So the legal landscape has changed a bit, but we will continue to fight the good fight and keep them accountable.
Yeah, no, as I look back and looked with admiration at the work Earth Justice did, Peer did, NRDC did, other litigators in the public interest area on environmental issues, I was proud to be an environmentalist, I'll tell you that. During Trump 1, it really made me feel like we were at the barricades or in the foxhole or somewhere messy and contested. Scott, what is your sense of the issues that have come up so far in front of Mr. Zeldin? He seems to have parried pretty well Senator Sanders' questioning about climate. I was surprised he went so far as to say, in effect, he didn't think it was a hoax. I'm not sure you're supposed to cross President-elect Trump on such things.
Well, and plenty of other of President Trump's nominees, most notably the incoming Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, has decried climate hysteria. That's a common term we now hear. I think while Republican, I guess I'll just say it's sad that we still have to check with Republican nominees to see whether they think that the climate change is real and that carbon pollution is contributing to the climate crisis. It sort of says a lot about
low bar.
How much more progress we need to make, and I think Republicans have really weaponized this issue in a way to try to advance their anti-regulatory agenda. While we haven't been able to hear Senator Merkley's questions, I'm really hopeful that he'll get asked about some of the other kitchen table issues, or maybe kitchen table adjacent, like your fridge, your drinking water, and to see if Congressman Zeldin is really committed to making sure that our drinking water remains safe, that we don't roll back some bans of some of the most dangerous pesticides, many of which already banned in other countries, but just recently banned by the Biden EPA. Yeah. Some of those issues that people are worried about when they go to the grocery store every day.
Let's turn to Senator Merkley and hear what he has to say.
Steeped yourself in the science and problems associated with plastics in the human body.
Yes, Senator, and I enjoyed being able to meet with you and your team in your office, where clearly this is an issue of great interest and passion of yours. I would look forward to an opportunity to be able to read what you're referencing specifically, just so that I can become intimately familiar with any detail that you're citing that I have not read before.
I was hoping that's what you're going to do after our meeting in our office. You're going to go out and say, I got to read all these articles.
And I would look forward to continuing to read even further.
There is an effort by the chemical industry to say, don't worry, we'll just melt everything down in big pots to keep plastics out of the waste stream. They call it chemical recycling. It's basically thermal melting, but it has proved to only be usable in very limited, basically manufacturing waste as opposed to post-consumer plastics, but they're trying to sell it as a absolute cure. Don't worry, we can go from 8% recycling in America to a high percent. Are you familiar with the very limited role, but the chemical industry is trying to say, don't worry, be happy on plastics?
I'm aware, yes, sir.
Do you understand, and have you made yourself knowledgeable of the inaccuracies that are being publicized about this thermal strategy?
Senator, I am researching and reading all that's being provided on all sides of this issue. Going back to my time in the House, I advocated to clean up our waterways around my district. And as I cited in my opening, the bipartisan work between Senator Whitehouse and Senator Sullivan on Save Our Seas and Save Our Seas 2.0 should be a model to be followed of bipartisanship to go even further.
Yeah. I see I'm over time. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I'll just close by saying in plastics, there's a big story trying to be sold about don't worry. It'll be your responsibility to make sure you speak the truth to the American people.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to congratulate you and the ranking member. It's a great committee for our new members. We get a lot of things done here, usually very bipartisan. We have some differences, but that's okay. Mr. Zeldin, it was great meeting with you. Congratulations to your family as well. Thanks for your service. It's not always easy, we know. You know, Alaska, we love our clean water, clean air. We don't think, we know we have some of the cleanest air and water in the world. We're proud of that. We don't always think the EPA has helped in that regard. It's more state actions. So I want to begin by getting you to commit to me to come up to Alaska with me, bring your family. We can do some fishing maybe after you see all the important elements of Alaska. Big mountains, no offense to Utah, but real big mountains. So we have a little fun on state size in this committee. But can I get your commitment to do that?
Yes, Senator. And unlike predecessors of mine who attempted to try to negotiate an August trip, I would want to go when it's as cold and dark as possible.
Yeah, well, it's happening right now. We have communities in Alaska that are hitting 30, 40 below zero. And so we'd love to have you in the winter and summer. So
Senator Ricketts looks like he wants to come with me, so I look forward to it.
Love to have him. Second, I really appreciate the shout out to me and Senator Whitehouse on the Save Our Seas Act, Save Our Seas 2.0. That was the most comprehensive ocean cleanup legislation in the history of the country. Those were both signed by President Trump. You might want to ask Senator Whitehouse at some point about the signing ceremony that we had in the Oval Office with President Trump on Save Our Seas 1.0 was Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross and others. It was great. So can you commit to me to work with this committee? I think we already have President Trump's commitment to continue the progress we've made on ocean cleanup, plastics cleanup. It's good bipartisan work. The Trump administration and the president himself is very committed, and so are we. And we're already working on 3.0. We got to focus on the implementation of SOS 2.0, though.
Yes,
Can we get your commitment on that?
Yes.
Great. Well, look, I want to go back to Senator Kramer's issue of, in your opening statement about honoring cooperative federalism. And as you know, our Clean Air Act, our Clean Water Act laws from Congress contemplate a scheme of cooperative federalism that provides an active, in some case, primary role for states on these laws. Will you commit to doing to that? Because it's a really important issue for my state.
Yes, Senator.
So one of the areas where we haven't seen cooperative federalism at all is the way in which the EPA in my state has a history of enforcing the laws. And no offense to my Democratic colleagues, this is always with Democrat administrations. The Obama administration did what they do is they come in with giant, heavy armed agents, body armor, helicopters, like it's shocking. We had a raid on some placer miners in a place called Chicken, Alaska under President Obama. Over 30 armed agents, body armors to Do what? Do compliance on the Clean Water Act. They didn't find one violation. They scared the hell out of the miners, okay? Then, not to be outdone, the Biden administration has done these raids on small mechanic shops in Alaska. They bring up EPA agents from all over the country, 30 armed agents kicking in doors in mechanic shops in Alaska. By the way, my state believes in the Second Amendment. Most of my state is armed. This is very dangerous because some of these agents could get shot when they're coming in. So what's happened is you don't have cooperative federalism. You have rogue EPA agents who are going to enforcement before they talk about compliance. On any of these issues, they could have gone to these mechanic shops. They could have gone to the miners saying, hey, we think you may be violating the Clean Water Act. Can you work with us? No, these guys come, they had 40 agents, all of them armed, raiding these mechanic shops. It is just an outrage. Can I get your commitment to focus on compliance rather than jumping to armed enforcement? And secondly, look, I believe in an armed citizenry. I believe in the Second Amendment. I don't believe in an armed bureaucracy. The EPA is a SWAT team. Do you believe the EPA should even have armed agents? When they go into places, they can just have the local police or local state troopers. You got these guys out of control in Alaska, and it is dangerous. And the current EPA administrator, I sent him letters on this. He didn't answer me. Someone's going to get hurt. Can I get your commitment to focus on compliance, civil compliance, as opposed to kicking in doors with body armor, assault rifles, helicopters? It's crazy. And it's really outrageous. And it happens under Democrats, not President Trump, Democrats.
Senator, it is outrageous. The story that you told and Senator Murkowski shared with me as well with regards to chicken,
Tim,
Alaska.
I want to hear from him. I have not followed this enforcement story of or the controversy in Alaska very closely. I don't know if you have either, Tim, but I know we're about to lose you. You've got to go on to another engagement. Any thoughts on what you've closing thoughts from you about the hearing so far, and maybe even including? Are you armed now, Tim? Do you have any? I don't see any armor on you, so you might want to. Might want to step back a little bit.
I was an EPA enforcement attorney for 10 years and have followed EPA enforcement. And I can assure the viewers here that there is criminal enforcement at EPA. It's very rare. There are armed agents, but they're very rarely used, and they're only used for good reasons. And so I don't know the circumstances of this case, but to characterize EPA enforcement as these armed thugs, coming with helicopters to impress themselves upon innocent people is highly questionable, and it's sort of a right-wing talking point. One thing I do want to say before I leave is, we're talking about cooperative federalism, and that is a buzzword. It sounds very good, but the reality is in most states, particularly those that are conservative, environmental enforcement and compliance has dropped off the cliff. And at the state levels. So take Florida, for example. Florida, which has significant water quality problems, their enforcement has declined by 2/3 since 2010. And there are real consequences to that. And so the federal government must be involved both as a backup to the states and asserting jurisdiction where Congress has authorized them to do so. Congress authorizes EPA to act under these statutes. So I do not subscribe to the senator's view at all. I think it's a extreme right-wing talking point.
Yeah, I have seen reference to this Alaska raid and the other mentioned in Fox News coverage. So obviously it's been highlighted here for his purposes.
And there are threats against EPA employees that are very significant, and the language against federal employees in certain parts of this country are becoming very, very dangerous. and particularly in the federal land agencies, but also EPA. And so we are potentially entering a very dangerous time for federal employees working in certain parts of the country.
Yeah, no question. Tim, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Ken. It's a wonderful discussion.
Yep.
Bye.
More to come. More to come, brother. Let's go to Senator Kelly just briefly.
Is not going to work in Phoenix. It's just not. So we need partnership and collaboration with the EPA headquarters and EPA Region 9 to address these challenges. And we've been working closely with state and local officials and our business community on this. And there are specific actions that we're asking for EPA partnership on. So I'd like to ask for your commitment to working with us on these issues. I'm going to go through them. There's like 4 of them. First, we have several new source review permits currently under review by the Region 9 office. If confirmed, will you commit to ensuring that those permits are prioritized for review?
Senator, your priorities will be mine. We'll make sure that we follow the law but making sure that this is top of the list.
Thank you. And second, Maricopa County has submitted 2 local rules, which are called Rule 204 and 205. We spoke about those in my office that would provide alternative pathways for generating offsets for new permits for new manufacturing facilities. So remember what I said, we don't have the heavy manufacturing that's shut down that would generate a permit. So these rules have some other ways to do that. So both rules are still pending final approval, although I understand that Region 9 and Maricopa County have been meeting weekly on this to resolve some outstanding issues. But Mr. Zeldin, will you commit to ensuring this coordination between EPA and the county can continue with the goal of having both rules approved as soon as possible?
Senator, while I can't prejudge outcome as far as approval goes on anything, you absolutely have my commitment to be able to work with you, those local partners, to come to Arizona. You also mentioned the Yuma example as well. And as you pointed out, you come from a state where in a place like Maricopa, you don't have a lot of these sites shutting down. You have more coming in, which is a good problem to have in one way, but you definitely need that partnership with EPA.
Yeah, it's challenging in the other way.
Right.
And that's what we've got to figure out. Third, as I noted, we're still trying to understand the long-term reasons our air quality is getting worse and how to resolve that challenge. Will you commit to help Maricopa County develop some better models to understand why our air quality is getting worse in Maricopa County and help us find some solutions to address this long-term?
Yes, Senator.
And fourth, in that same vein, we know that emissions from Mexico are a serious contributor to our air quality challenges throughout Arizona. Will you commit to having the EPA Region 9 and the EPA Office of Transportation and Air Quality work with our local officials to ensure that our attainment plans account for cross-border pollution?
Yes, Senator. I also heard this concern from both Senator Schiff and Senator Padilla as it relates to Tijuana and the southern border of California. This is clearly an issue across states. I look forward to working with you on this issue.
And then finally, will you also commit to working to find solutions to ensure regions throughout the Western United States aren't penalized for emissions created by wildfire smoke?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Chairman Capito, and congratulations again to Chairman Capito and Ranking Member Whitehouse on your new roles. And you mentioned our new member, Senator Curtis, but we also have a new member, Senator Schiff, with us as well.
We actually have 3 new members on our side, and I've been waiting for them to assemble.
Oh, okay, very good. I didn't want to leave Senator Schiff out because he's sick there. So, yep, no, not at all. I'm excited to work with the entire team here with regard to the upcoming session here. And Congressman Zeldin, good to see you again. Thank you very much for being here, and again, appreciate your family sacrifices in the past and serving our country, and your continued willingness to sacrifice and serve our country again in this new role. You know, rule of law is what binds Americans' trust to government, right? all too often, we've seen under this Biden administration that the rule of law and congressional intent has been subverted by trying to appease radical left-wing environmentalists. And that undermines people's faith in government and the rule of law and the trust of our institutions. So thank you for your commitment to implementing the laws as Congress has written and is intended to be able to get back to the fundamentals of the EPA, which is protecting our environment, safeguarding our health, and looking out for the well-being of the public. I'm excited to restore this proper balance of limiting risk with using sound science to protect our environment as the EPA's mission as Congress, which is the EPA's mission as Congress directed it to do. We must follow the law to restore Nebraskans' faith in our government institutions. So one of the areas that you're going to have an opportunity to be able to do that has to do with our renewable fuel standard. And this is one of the things I've commented in the past. I love this committee because we talk about ethanol and biodiesel and renewable diesel all the time. Chairman Capito will get tired of me doing that. But what we've seen in the past under the Biden administration is that, RVOs are set below production levels and they're chronically late. For example, the RVOs for 2026 are required by law to be published on November 1st, 2024. That did not happen. And it's not likely to happen until probably December 2025. The 2023 and 2024 RVOs will lag behind industry production by 3 to 4 billion gallons. That's the actual capacity of the industry today. Congressman Zeldin, do you commit to give producers and the industry certainty in the marketplace deserves? And again, this is what businesses want. They want certainty. They want to know what the rules are so they can plan for it. Will you give them the certainty by following the law as it relates to the timely and appropriate?
Hearing for just a minute, I wanted to, Scott Faber and I have worked on ethanol for many years. This is a longstanding controversy. It really comes down to we grow way too much corn and we got to do something with it. And so we're turning it into ethanol and we need to find a way, a market for it. So we force that market to exist by ethanol mandates. This is what Senator from Nebraska is speaking to now. And as a consequence, that runs up against controversy with the oil industry. Both industries create considerable damage to put fuel in our tanks of our SUVs and whatever else. And so here we have a reprise of that fight that all springs from the fact that we grow way more corn than we need for human consumption, of course, in any way, including cattle feed or animal feed. What's your sense of how the Trump administration might have to tackle this issue? They have two warring interests, both of which are overwhelmingly supportive of President Trump. So this will be an interesting fight.
Well, and as you said, Ken, the jury is in, and it turns out that adding ethanol to our gasoline was a mistake. It was a mistake because gasoline is actually marginally better. Burning gasoline is marginally better for the climate than burning ethanol, because we plow up so much land to grow the additional corn that's used to make ethanol. It was a mistake. Because it sometimes it drives up the cost of gasoline for consumers, and it's not only bad energy policy and bad farm policy, it's bad food policy because it lifts up the price of corn. It drives up the price of products that are really influenced by the price of corn, like eggs and chicken. So. But as you said, the oil industry has always opposed having to blend ethanol into gasoline, in part because it drives up the price of gasoline certain times of the year, and they will have a big say over ethanol policy. In the long run, the inevitable growth of electric vehicles, which will continue regardless of who's in the White House, will really make these liquid biofuels obsolete. And that's the biggest challenge facing corn huskers like Senator Ricketts. Can't blame him for defending corn ethanol. But the writing is clearly on the wall that there simply isn't a long-term market for liquid fuels like corn ethanol Probably not even in aviation fuel, which is where a lot of these folks are now turning to find a new home for a fuel that nobody wants. If it was so great, we'd all pay more for it. Unfortunately, we're all required by law to put it in our gas tanks.
That's right. That's right. Another way in which we bail out the farm sector because they have unconstrained production driven by largely by federal policy. Nathan, I know we're going to lose you in a few minutes. Thank you so much for joining. Any closing thoughts on this topic or others? Because I know we're going to lose you. Although I do want to hear Senator Markey. Do you mind if we break away? Can you hang on for just a little bit until we hear from Senator Markey, or do you have to run?
I'm interested to hear from him too. So
okay.
Ideally, Senator, to the extent that, first off, I support all of the above energy.
No, I didn't ask you that. I said, do you believe it's imperative that we, using your words, reduce our reliance on fossil fuels? Do you still believe that?
In considering all factors, in an ideal world, we would be able to pursue always the cleanest, greenest energy sources possible.
Well, I'm not hearing you say that you agree with Lee Zeldin in 2016. So that means that we're in a completely different context than for your nomination hearing. Do you see the fires in LA right now? Did you see the storms ripple through Georgia and through North Carolina? The threat of climate change hasn't gone away since you said that in 2016. And I'm just worried now your change of tone is politics and not the science, which you apparently did believe at that time. Let me ask you the next question. Do you also accept that under the Supreme Court's ruling in 2007 in Massachusetts versus EPA, and in 3 subsequent cases, that the EPA is obligated to regulate greenhouse gases as air pollutants from motor vehicles, power plants, and other industrial sources, as, quote, the Supreme Court said in their decision, may reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health or welfare? Do you accept that as a mandate, Mr. Zeldin?
Authorized. Yes, Senator.
You do?
Authorized to, Senator.
Authorized to. You don't actually then accept the requirement that you have to deal with the endangerment that fossil fuels actually poses to LA or North Carolina or Florida or the Gulf Coast almost on a yearly basis. You don't accept that.
Senator, I just want to be accurate. And in citing Massachusetts versus EPA, the decision does not require the EPA. It
says
authorizes the
you're
EPA.
obligated. You're obligated to regulate. If you find there's an endangerment, you're obligated. Do you feel it's an obligation?
Yeah, but it doesn't say that you are obligated to, and that's it. There are steps that the EPA would have to take in order for an obligation to be created. I'm just going off the actual text.
Right. Well, again,
legislation.
Do you think we're in danger in LA? Do you think the people in North Carolina and the Gulf Coast were in danger?
Are they in danger? Absolutely. For people who are having their homes burned down.
Then you have an obligation to deal with that and to do something. I'm not hearing your job you see your job at the EPA as doing something about it. You know, we're watching firefighters run towards the flames in Los Angeles, and the EPA is responsible to keep the fiery embers of climate change under control. Power plants, cars, industry. Are you going to fight those dangers, Mr. Zeldin? Are you going, as you said in 2016, or are you going to fan the flames of destruction of the demand of the fossil fuel industry, which you now refuse to actually hold responsible for the rapidly warming country that we're living in?
Senator, there's a few things there. First off, as far as the Supreme Court case goes, it was not a decision of the Supreme Court that if there was a fire in 2025 in California, that if that fire creates a danger to people who are having their homes burn down, that the EPA is, then that triggers the EPA to, regulate carbon dioxide. There's just more to that. I'm just trying to be
Yeah,
accurate.
it's pretty simple. It says the EPA is supposed to be the environmental watchdog and not a fossil fuel lapdog. That's what it says.
But
And
it doesn't actually
EPA
say that,
is
Senator.
supposed to have families be able to sleep at night knowing their air is clean and the water is safe and their future is protected. And it just should not leave people up at night wondering if they are going to have danger that comes into their family's existence because of polluters. That's the job. And between 2016 and today, something has happened that you're not willing to just come right out and say the fossil fuels is the central culprit that has been ultimately created by human beings that the EPA's job has as a responsibility to reduce. And you refuse to actually take that central responsibility. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, congratulations to you and Senator Whitehouse.
Go back to
you all are going to be a great team
Nathan,
as
'cause I
usual.
know we're short on time with you. Quite a feisty exchange on climate there with Senator Markey, who's one of the leading champions for the environment in the Senate, and especially on the climate issue, but on many others as well, certainly on chemicals policy and environmental justice, and among other things. But what your thoughts, closing thoughts on where this hearing has taken us, Nathan? Any clearer understanding of what might be ahead? Any clearer sense of the divide here?
Sure. Well, just looking at that exchange and working backwards, it makes me think about what Representative Congressman Zeldin said in his opening statements, which is that he claims he will uphold EPA's mission. And I think what the Senator was just getting at there is that EPA's mission, point blank, is to protect the environment and protect public health. This Massachusetts versus EPA case back in, I believe, 2007 was it, said that that carbon emissions are air pollutants, and so it's really fascinating to hear Zeldin say he will uphold EPA's mission. He believes in climate change. But then if you look at his history, at the dark money groups that are backing him up, it just is quite the opposite. The agenda that he and the Trump administration more broadly are bringing to the EPA and this government, it's just not true what he's saying. I mean, this is a man who chairs the the American I can't remember but the AP he chairs one of these groups, the America First Policy Institute. They want to expand drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. They want to weaken the Clean Air Act, the Endangered Species Act. You look at these other groups that have put out their agendas, have sent them up to the Trump administration, American Petroleum Institute, National Association of Manufacturers. I mean, they all want to deregulate and to make the environment a more dangerous place. They want to give industry much more freedom and flexibility to pollute to their heart's desires. So he sounds nice up there trying to be amenable to what the senators are asking of him, but his positions and the groups that he works for say quite the opposite. So I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and hear a bit with this. And
thanks, Nathan.
We'll continue the fight because inevitably.
You bet, brother. We'll be right there with you. Let's go back to the hearing. We're talking about pesticides now.
Just said, Senator, that must be our goal. That should be the relationship between all agencies, including the interaction between the EPA and the USDA, in a way that you are able to go back to all of your constituents and to be able to talk about that progress that has been achieved as a result of these agencies working together.
Very good. For the last several years, the EPA failed to collaborate with industries and states prior to rulemaking. I think that's true of whatever administration has been in power. Early in the Biden administration, it became evident the EPA's agenda was shaped by the input from a narrow group of stakeholders. Given that every rulemaking has a significant impact on businesses, workers, and domestic manufacturing, which cannot simply be restored overnight, how will you work with industries more collectively to ensure that their concerns are addressed while maintaining a balanced approach to environmental protection?
Senator, first off, it is important that the EPA is always fulfilling our obligations under the law, that we are abiding by the rule of law, that we are following our commitment to Congress to be able to follow the Administrative Procedures Act and to ensure that all actions are durable well into the future. As far as engagement throughout that process, it is important to hear from people who have good, substantive, informed feedback that allows the EPA to be able to do a better job, to make better decisions. And that at times might involve me speaking to people who I might agree with or disagree with on any given day. But the worst thing that I could possibly do, that the EPA could do, is to turn a blind eye to great substantive feedback that will better inform our decisions so that we are being responsive and transparent, not just to Congress, but also to the American people.
Good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel I should address the mountains versus hills controversy. As a senator from a state in the West, I'm inclined to agree with Senator Curtis. But as I understand where the chair is from, and you are the chair, I'm inclined to agree with the chair.
Thank you.
So let me just say unequivocally, I've got friends on both sides of this issue, and I stand with my friends. Mr. Zeldin, as you're well aware, the horrific fires that have ravaged California over the last week have displaced thousands of people, resulted in the loss of more than 24 lives. As these fires continue to destroy Californians' homes, livelihoods, and so much more, it's more important than ever that California has the full support of the federal government to recover and respond. Fueled by severe drought conditions and strong Santa Ana winds, unimaginable events like these fires devastate communities and worsen Californians' water scarcity. When you were a state senator in New York, you were a member of the State Senate Bipartisan Task Force on Hurricane Sandy recovery. You applauded a comprehensive legislative package that included tax assessment relief for properties catastrophically damaged by the storm, revisions to regulatory obstacles that slow down the rebuilding process, and improvement and continued expansion of state insurance laws to help policymakers receive funds following a disaster and more. And in response to Hurricane Sandy, the EPA supported FEMA and worked closely with federal agencies and the states of New Jersey and New York to assess damage and respond to environmental concerns. The EPA stepped in to assess the condition of drinking water and wastewater facilities, helped to get several damaged wastewater treatment plants in New Jersey up and running, evaluated conditions at hazardous waste sites, and assisted in the collection of debris and household hazardous waste. Can you provide Californians with the assurance that you will advocate the same strong recovery and response assistance from EPA as EPA provided to your then constituency in Long Island after Hurricane Sandy, if confirmed?
Senator, first off, congratulations on your election. I look forward to working with you on this committee. And we all from the rest of the country have been watching what is playing out for your constituents. And many of us know people who have been impacted and they've lost everything. It's hard to it's impossible for us to put ourselves in the shoes of your constituents right now. I, if confirmed, would want to not only know everything in my power to be able to do as EPA administrator to assist you in fighting for your constituents who have been devastated by these wildfires, but I would want to, in fact, do everything in my power to be able to assist, to make sure that this recovery is as speedy as possible. I would like to come to California to speak to those on the ground, hear any concerns that we need to take back with us to Washington, and to assist both you and Senator Padilla and your House colleagues to be able to fight for these constituents who have lost everything.
Thank you, Mr. Zeldin. We will welcome you to the state and look forward to your visit. After the Maui fires in August 2023, EPA crews removed more than 200 tons of hazardous materials from 1,400 plus properties in the fire impacted areas. The EPA also deployed water emergency team members to provide on-the-ground guidance and technical assistance for stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water for the county of Maui. Do you commit also to prioritizing similar assistance for California to ensure that local water supplies are tested, treated, and restored to safe drinking water standards, just as EPA stepped in to do after the horrific Maui fires?
Senator, I would want to do everything in my power, if confirmed as EPA administrator, to be able to assist with that as well.
And I assume, Mr. Zeldin, your response will not depend on whether disaster strikes a red state or a blue state. You will equally work to speed relief to those Americans affected.
Yes, Senator. It does not matter what kind of a state you're from. All 50 states are going to be of the highest importance, regardless of where a disaster ever strikes anywhere in America.
Thank you. Let me touch on one other major issue that we discussed yesterday. That's the Tijuana River pollution crisis. This crisis has brought immense industrial waste and raw sewage over the border from Mexico into California, posing serious environmental and public health challenges to San Diego and Imperial County. We've had beaches shut down. We've had sealed training facilities deeply impacted. Coast Guard and Customs and Border personnel have routinely reported suffering from infections and gastrointestinal illnesses. Thanks to the work of Senator Padilla and Representative Scott Peters and others, we were able to secure $250 million in disaster supplemental relief in December. But EPA can play a pivotal role in this crisis as well. I would ask you to support EPA's Border Water Infrastructure Program, but also will you agree to review EPA's January 7th decision to deny requests to investigate the Tijuana River Valley for a potential Superfund designation? I'm not asking you to prejudge it, but will you agree to review it and consider whether a different judgment should be reached?
Yes, Senator.
I thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Lummis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Congratulations to you and to our ranking.
Just to speak a little bit to the tone, I've been commenting to my colleagues on text here. Lee Zeldin comes across as an old school happy warrior, a moderate in his tone and his style. Obviously, Senator Schiff was trying to get at the politicization of disaster relief that has emerged with criticism mostly from Republicans and from Fox News and other sources over the LA fires, where it is blamed on Democrats for their past behavior, allegedly, and the idea of conditioning assistance on some aspect of change on the part of governance in the state of California at the state or local level. And I think Schiff was very successful, and Zeldin was very responsive to say we're not going to look at the electoral map as a layer of consideration when we're thinking about aiding people who are in dire need because of a disaster. I want to welcome my colleague from EWG, Sydney Evans. I know you've been, like all of us have at EWG, we have so many friends and colleagues in Southern California watching with horror and alarm and sorrow what has transpired there. But the reality is, and Senator Schiff outlined some of the aspects of it, we have seen a big part of Los Angeles go from being a very beautiful residential area to really a toxic waste dump in the matter of a week, where there will be enormous challenges with respect to pollution running off from those sites, emanating as air emissions, the prospect of people going in to recover and rebuild is going to mean huge amounts of dispersion of toxic chemicals into the environment, human exposures for those who are involved in in the clearing of all the rubble and the rebuilding process. And your day-to-day involves you, Sydney, with looking at human exposures in water and food and other sources. This is going to be a tall order for Californians, and it seems as if what we're hearing from Mr. Zeldin is that EPA is going to be there to help.
You would hope so, because incidents like these, while unfortunate and heartbreaking, they're not unique. I mean, we're seeing them all across the country all the time, whether it's due to natural disasters or, man-made incidents from industry, where there are threats to our environment, especially to drinking water. And that's something that I'm really concerned about, seeing how they're going to handle this in the coming administration. Yeah, absolutely. And we want to believe that when Mr. Zeldin says EPA will be there to help without consideration, that there won't be, he will be a voice within the administration of not attaching strings to disaster assistance, including whatever might be rendered by EPA. That's certainly what came across. You would think that would be some sort of baseline level of what we would expect, right? Low bar, right? But it's a very low bar, but I guess we've at least checked that box, right? Yeah, for sure. Let's head back to Senator Loomis, who's asking some questions about energy and particularly the emergence of AI and the demands from data centers.
All types of fuels in developing the energy this country needs in order to be artificial intelligence leader of the world. Now, I have another question with regard to small refineries. Thank you for indulging that editorial comment. Are you aware that there are more than 100 petitions for hardship relief that remain to be decided by EPA, some dating back more than 5 years with regard to small refineries? And if confirmed, can we work together to outline an expedient timeline for reaching decisions?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I want to include a couple of other questions that I think are of significance with regard to PFAS. And I'm running between two hearings, so excuse me if I'm being repetitive. Do you plan to ensure that EPA's policies are effective while protecting passive receivers from lawsuits and consumers with unreasonably high utility bills? And let me explain here. The Biden administration's plan to designate legacy PFAS as hazardous substances under CERCLA can impose liability on entities like municipal water systems that did not produce or knowingly handle these chemicals. So these entities are called passive receivers. I know that it's true at airports. They have PFAS issues as well. And so these passive receivers are now vulnerable to lawsuits that literally could bankrupt small local governments across the nation. My concern is that, of course, we address PFAS issues, but not in a way that submits small local municipal water systems and airports to litigation.
Senator, thank you for raising this issue, and I've heard it from your colleagues on this committee on both sides of the aisle during my meetings. It's something that is a big issue to you, and it will therefore be a big issue for me. And I also saw it in my home county of Suffolk County, where we had PFAS issues. The passive receiver issue is something where it could get passed down to the consumer, where they end up paying for the cleanup costs in a way that we need to be cognizant of at the EPA.
Thank you, Mr. Zeldin. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sorry I ran over.
No, good. I am pleased to welcome one of our newer members, Senator Also Brooks, and I would welcome you and remind you that you have very large shoes to fill with Senator Cardin leaving from the great state of Maryland, and I'm sure you'll be able to do that. So welcome, and it's great to have you on committee.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to just say thank you so much to Chairwoman Capito and Ranking Member Whitehouse for your leadership on this committee and for holding today's hearing. I agree with you that we miss Senator Ben Cardin, but I am excited to be able to join this committee. EPW has jurisdiction over many issues that are important to Marylanders, and I look forward to working with both of you as well as all of our colleagues on this committee to address the environmental and infrastructure challenges that we face in our states. To Mr. Zeldin, congratulations again to you and to your family on your nomination. And thank you as well for your willingness to serve and for appearing before our committee today. I appreciate it. I very much enjoyed meeting with you and having the opportunity to speak with you. And so I suspect that my questions will come as no surprise to you based on that conversation. And in the interest of time here, I'd ask that as much as possible that you would answer yes or no to the following questions. Now, while in Congress, you work to ensure that EPA's efforts to restore the Long Island Sound were successful, including advocating for federal funding. Like Long Island Sound in New York and Connecticut, the Chesapeake Bay is an economic driver in Maryland and across the Bay watershed. The Bay is the nation's largest estuary and is one of the most productive fisheries in the United States. And so I ask you whether you would agree that restoring and protecting our nation's estuaries and watersheds is a shared responsibility between the states and the federal government.
Yes, Senator.
Furthermore, if confirmed, will you advocate for robust federal funding for regional restoration efforts across the country, including the Chesapeake Bay and for the National Estuary Program?
Yes, Senator. Ultimately, it will be up to Congress to decide on funding levels, and it'll be my obligation to make sure that money is spent to Congress's intent.
Thank you. Now, the EPA has said that no amount of lead in drinking water is safe. And lead in drinking water is particularly dangerous for children. The bipartisan infrastructure law, which you oppose as a member of Congress, made historic down payments on lead pipe replacement to ensure that communities across America have access to safe drinking water from lead contamination. If confirmed, will you build on the success of the bipartisan infrastructure law and support additional funding for lead pipe replacement?
Senator, yes to the same answer as my last question. Ultimately, it's going to be up to Congress to decide what the policy is, what the law is, what the funding level is. My commitment and my obligation will be to make sure that funding is spent to Congress's intent as laid out in those appropriations.
But you recognize that lead in water is a problem, particularly for children.
Yes, Senator.
And would you be able to commit to not cutting funding that would aid in replacement of these lead pipes?
Senator, if confirmed as administrator of the EPA, won't be cutting any funding. That's a decision as far as funding levels for Congress to set. Whatever funding level Congress decides upon is going to be the letter that is going to be the number that I am committed to fulfill my obligation of being a good steward of the tax dollars and spend to Congress's intent.
Okay. Now, the unofficial Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk has proposed laying off 75% of government workers. Across the federal government, their plan would result in more than 1.7 million civilian employees being laid off, including almost 500,000 veterans. If the Trump administration follows through on this proposal, that would mean more than 12,000 employees at the EPA would be laid off. And many of these are hardworking, dedicated public servants who live in Maryland. Do you support firing 75% of EPA employees?
Senator, offhand, I'm not even aware of a single person being fired during the first Trump administration at the EPA. That's not the same for other agencies. And by the way, there might have been someone, I'm just, haven't been told about it. I want to make sure that my job as EPA administrator is to increase productivity, is to make sure that we are efficient and accountable and transparent, that we are to you, not just myself as administrator, but our entire team, for us to be in the office, collaborative and productive.
All right, in a similar vein, I'd ask you about another issue, and that is moving EPA headquarters outside of Washington, D.C., and wonder whether or not you agree with that effort and the effort of moving them out of Washington, D.C., or whether you would oppose it.
Senator, no one has expressed to me in any setting since I was announced as nominee or before that of any plans with regards to moving the EPA headquarters out of DC. I have not been involved in any conversation. I'm not aware of any conversation.
That's the time I have. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Senator Graham.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Really good choice. You're a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
What do you do?
I'm currently an international law officer for a civil affairs command based in Fort Wadsworth, New York.
So you're a JAG officer?
Yes, Senator.
So if Pete Hexpa gives you a hard time, call me.
Right. Yes, Senator. You got it.
So, so Senator Whitehouse and myself have been working on climate issues for a long time, and I saw that you were chairman or a member of the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Why don't you do that?
I represented a district where I was hearing from constituents on both sides of the aisle of how important it is that I was doing everything to fulfill their priorities, their policy pursuits.
It matters
They
to your
wanted me to join it.
constituents. Your constituents concerned about the environment.
Very much so, Senator.
Okay, well, and I think they're right to be. In terms of fires and, God bless the people of California. We want to help them as much as we can, quick as we can. Helena came through South Carolina, North Carolina is just very tough. Let's help people. Is it okay to try to look at lessons learned when you look at disasters? What can we do better next time?
We must do that, Senator.
Yeah, I would encourage you to not be deterred from looking at lessons learned, no matter where it happens in any part of the country. Let's learn from these disasters, see if we can do better next time. So one thing that I find fascinating is I can tell you what states grow corn because they want to talk about ethanol. I can tell you exactly when you have the Senator from Wyoming saying natural gas is clean, she's right. But why is she saying that? Because the truth is America has become environmentally sensitive. We want to lower emissions, but we don't want to wreck our economy. And it doesn't matter what we do if other people don't play the same game. So the good news for me to this committee is that energy producing states, when that energy source seems to have a positive environmental impact, they're proud of it. Nuclear power, do you think nuclear power should be part of the mix?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, me too. I think small modular reactors need to be looked at again. We had disasters building big nuclear power plants, but they're not emitting sources of fuel like every other fuel source. They have their problems and downside, but I'm glad I think my state has the most power from the nuclear industry per capita than any state in the nation, and I'm a big fan of trying to expand our nuclear power footprint. Look forward to working with you. Now, no matter what we do here, I think a lot of us feel like we've gone too far. EPA's ignored the law. They kind of have a political agenda rather than a congressional agenda, or they violate Supreme Court holdings. We'll have that debate among ourselves. But one thing I think we need to look at, no matter what we do here, we all care about the environment. But when it comes to CO2 emissions, let's just use that. China and India, the Paris Accords, to me, were insufficient to the task. I've been working with Senator Whitehouse. How can you get big economies like China and India to adopt better practices? Tariffs if you're a tariff person, your shift has come in. We have tariffs on everything and everybody, apparently. But one of the things that Senator Whitehouse and I have been talking about is a carbon pollution fee, tariff, call it whatever you want. That if you're in China and you're making steel and you have the worst business practices, you're in India, you have really basically no environmental practices at all. Europe and the United States were trying to have responsible manufacturing and energy extraction, trying to be environmentally sensitive, realize we've got to run an economy. What should we do about China and India? Do you like the idea, or at least you open-minded to the idea that people who basically use unsound science, reckless environmental policy, maybe it's time for them to pay a fee?
Well, Senator, and thank you for your service as well. As you remember, learning about the dime principle as an officer in the military, we have multiple instruments of national power. So putting aside the military, we have instruments of national power of multilateral, bilateral diplomacy, information operations, and economic pressure. We need to be utilizing all instruments of national power to be able to deal with adversaries abroad across the spectrum of all the issues that face our country. With regards to specific policies, and you brought this up, your work with Senator Whitehouse on this issue when we met in your office, and I know that this is important to both of you. Ultimately, this is a matter for Congress to decide in what direction Congress wants to see this country go as far as writing laws and
Do you agree with the concept that we need to push China and India? I mean, they have an advantage. They're not playing the same game that Europe and the United States is playing, and I think it's a game we should all be playing. Are you open-minded to push them to do better?
Yes, Senator.
All right, we'll go to Senator Wicker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zeldin. I am absolutely delighted that someone of your intellect and character.
That's the first pro-environment. I'm not an expert on this notion of a carbon pollution fee for imported products, but I think that's the first pro-environment proposal that's been posed from the Republican side, and to get the reaction from Mr. Zeldin. Of course, he was non-committal, but the fact that there is a bipartisan initiative to try and find some way to tease out the carbon penalty that we're all paying when industries in China and India and elsewhere that produce goods we're importing is contributing to climate change in a way that is offsetting whatever we might do here. And I also thought that it was interesting, not a surprise, that Senator Graham was, teasing out the notion that the environment is a topic that everyone's concerned about across the country. This is not something that can be trampled on easily. And again, a departure, I think, from Zeldin, from the tone set by the president-elect time and time again, and of course also the tone that's sometimes set by the imaginary Department of Government Efficiency and Secretary Elon Musk, who's the head of it. Let's head back to the hearing.
Wastewater system and do it in a hurry. Happy to do this, but the federal government having told us that we have to do it, we're going to need some help. And so I hope that you can commit to using all your authority at your disposal through subsidy loans and other mechanisms to help us fund this very expensive thing that's being required of us. I believe the EPA should engage with regional offices to ensure that they're taking proactive role in addressing critical needs. So will you commit in your new role to working with us and with the city of Memphis to resolve this problem?
Yes, Senator.
I very much appreciate that. Now, let's move down to Jackson, Mississippi, where we've had a flood problem for some decades. A flood control measure was authorized in the WOTUS Act of 1986. I don't know what you were doing in 1986, Mr. Zeldin, but it is a long time ago. This initiative has undergone several revisions, and at my urging and my almost weekly and monthly exhortations, we are nearing final approval of the Pearl River Flood Control Project in Jackson, Mississippi. The local sponsor backing the project, which is the Rankin-Hines County Pearl River Flood and Drainage Control District, has diligently addressed all the environmental concerns. I hope we get approved in this calendar year, but I don't want decisions made in some room where our guys are not there to at least put their point of view in. So would you agree that local sponsors should?
So of course, you see in these hearings, everything from essentially what Senator Wicker's pursuing now is casework for a local problem in his state. And of course, we saw it mentioned by Senator Schiff and others, things that are of local state concern to them. Makes all the sense in the world. Everything from that to Senator Graham talking about very global issues such as carbon pollution from other countries. Through it all, Mr. Zeldin, again, has been a happy warrior, very responsive. Seems like he'll wear well with this committee in terms of his interactions, and seems like he comes across as legitimately concerned about all of this. But we also have what we know to be the case, a tremendous amount of pressure that will be on him to deregulate. This is a story I put up earlier from Greenwire, from a great reporter, Kevin Bogardus from Greenwire. And the headline reads, Biden rebuilt EPA, will Trump wreck things? And here's a segment from it, a sampling of the article. The Biden administration marked a history-making chapter for the nation's premier environmental agency as it took in tens of billions of dollars in new funding, hired thousands of employees, and churned out far-reaching regulations on air and water, as well as climate change and chemicals. It was a sharp U-turn from the previous Trump administration, and the agency looks set for another 180-degree turn after President-elect is inaugurated next week. So we'll go back to Trump 1 style. Just about everything, he quotes former EPA administrator, former Governor Christine Todd Whitman, just about everything will be on the table to be pulled back under the next administration. And the former New Jersey governor said the Biden administration's major rules are in danger while its push for environmental justice, aid for marginalized communities saddled with pollution will be stunted. And finally, listing out some of the signature steps that were taken under the Biden administration. Power plant limits for greenhouse gas emissions and tailpipe pollution rules for cars and trucks top that list of things that are probably in the target zone for the incoming administration. You wouldn't know it from this hearing. Also, the agency finished drinking water standards and hazardous waste designations for some per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, known as forever chemicals, as well as regulations for fine particulate matter, or soot. Restrictions on methane from oil and gas operations were finalized. Trump is expected to try to roll back most, if not all, of those EPA rules. And we saw a reference to a pressure that's building to put a loophole into federal law that would potentially let some people off the hook for PFAS pollution for reasons that we think are not, this is Senator Loomis bringing this up, we think are probably not legit. We think we can crack down on these substances without requiring excessive liability on the part of anyone who didn't contribute to putting those into the environment, and we should try and get the polluters to pay. Let's cut back to Senator Padilla.
Be a member of this dais on any question and every issue that gets brought forward, that I will always follow my obligations under the law. And while there are processes in the future on different topics where I can commit to following the Administrative Procedures Act, I will tell you that I will not prejudge any outcomes of any future processes, again, on any issue that any member could bring up here. But Senator, I would reiterate to you today that it is my obligation as EPA Administrator, if confirmed, to follow the law.
Thank you. And another topic we covered in our meeting is one of clean air attainment and the challenges with the federal role and responsibility, state, local role. Half the people in America who live in a non-attainment area live in California, particularly in the Central Valley and the South Coast Air Quality Management District footprint. We have to work together to reduce the sources of toxic emissions. Based on these jurisdictions, it's been challenging. California state and local officials have done pretty much everything they can to tackle this, yet we still have challenges when it comes to ensuring that every Californian, every American living in California can breathe clean air. So I want to be clear. We need the federal government to do its part by working a little bit more aggressively, assertively, smartly, and strategically to help reduce these emissions, help us reach attainment, not by lowering the bar, but by doing the work in areas that the locals have not been granted the jurisdiction to do so. So can I count on your commitment to use regulatory authority to do just that?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, wonderful. And just a side note, as we will continue to work together, ensuring that jurisdictions like Southern California are not punished for non-attainment if it's resulting from the recent wildfires and the smoke and other emissions that have resulted from this disaster or disasters like it.
Yes, Senator, I've heard this concern from other colleagues of yours as well. We're just talking to Senator Kelly about it, as I cited the Yuma example, and he was asking about Maricopa County. It is important that we have common sense, pragmatic policies that are being pursued to address issues just like your concern.
Yeah, to your point, and I'm glad Senator Kelly brought it up, these concerns about fires and their impact, not just the short-term devastation, but the longer term when it comes to public health, when it comes to air quality, is not unique to California. I mean, California is in the news right now, but throughout the West and beyond because of our changing climate and weather patterns. You know, another important topic that we discussed in my office is not just water supply, water quality, but water affordability. Millions of Americans are struggling to keep up with their growing water bills, which have increased nearly 3 times the rate of inflation. According to the EPA, water utilities it will cost water utilities more than $1.2 trillion over the next 20 years to modernize their drinking water and wastewater infrastructure and maintain it. Water utilities, unique to other utilities, rely heavily on ratepayers to cover their costs. Federal government's share of maintaining this infrastructure has come down significantly over the years. So ratepayers are acutely feeling this pressure. And as a result, 1 in 5 households have outstanding and growing water debt. The national water affordability crisis affects both urban and rural communities. So it's not a rural versus urban, blue state versus red state. It is across the board. I shared with you the idea of replicating the LIHEAP program. We have a low-income home energy assistance program because you shouldn't have to freeze in the winter just because you may be low income. The same applies to having water. We know how fundamental water is for life and the economy. We've had a temporary water assistance program for low-income customers. Do you agree, and can we work together to make that permanent to tackle some of these challenges, including addressing the PFAS concerns that you're very familiar with?
Senator, having access to clean drinking water is something that I want to, if confirmed, to be able to do my part, and working with you and your colleagues across the entire country to deliver. Every American, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, should be able to access clean drinking water. I will follow all my obligations under the law, and to the fullest extent of the law, I would like to assist in those efforts for you to fight for your constituents and every senator here to fight for their constituents in this respect.
So the temporary program was hugely successful, helping families and, again, red states and blue states alike. Look forward to working with you to make that program permanent.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Moran.
Chairwoman, thank you. And thank you, Ranking Member, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm pleased to be back and sitting here at the dais at the EPA committee. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for the conversation we've had in my office. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Let me highlight a couple of things that we may not have talked about when we did visit. I want to describe the Kansas oil and gas industry to you. We are an oil and gas producing state. but our production is done by really small independent companies that produce from what we call stripper wells, which means they produce less than 15 barrels of oil a day. It's a significant component of the Kansas economy and significantly important. And in my view, this small-sized, small businessman and woman who operate oil and gas leases and explore for additional production of oil and gas, the EPA has written one-size-fits-all solutions. We are not the majors, and we are stripper well producers. And I just want your commitment to work with the industry, these small producers, to find right-sized regulations for the circumstances that they're in.
Senator, I would welcome an opportunity to travel to your state to meet with them, whether it's at your office.
I want to ask Sydney, who spends a lot of her time worrying about clean water, and there's a lot of concern that there will be efforts made because of industries that don't want to have to deal with the consequences of federal regulations to clean up water. They don't want to pay for it. Water utilities and chemical companies have sued EPA over the PFAS regulations that have been issued. I think we can expect that water utilities, they have also sued to prevent implementation of the lead and copper rule strengthening that has taken place under the Biden administration. So those will be targeted as well, I think, either through agency action or possibly a clawback under the by Congress. So what's your sense of how it seems like Zeldin is, time and again sympathizing and saying he's going to implement the law, he's going to do as told. Doesn't seem to be consistent, at least with the rhetoric that's come out in this round of the Trump administration.
Yeah, that's been one of my biggest concerns because for so long my work has focused on clean water, access to clean water, and chemical contaminants. And we saw one of the, I think, biggest step forwards in water regulation and drinking water access and safety for people with the changes that the last administration put as far as protecting people from specifically PFAS. I mean, that was the first new contaminant that had been regulated in decades. And because it applies to so many people, the impacts of that are so widespread. And I can understand why the, water utilities would be in this place of fear and pushing back, because it is going to be such a huge requirement because of how widespread this contaminant is. But that doesn't mean that we don't use the MCL. It doesn't mean we need to push back on these regulations. It means that the funding for this needs to come from those polluters who are responsible for putting PFAS in our water in the first place.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And in some, quite a few instances, water utilities have actually sued these polluters to get funds to pay for the treatment of the drinking water that's coming in. And there's going to be a lot of pressure, I think, from the industry to avoid that liability, maybe even efforts to extinguish the right of localities to go to court. On the lead and copper rule, that was just issued in October, requiring replacement of lead pipes within 10 years and funding to provide clean water for schools and homes with respect to lead. And there's concern, since that was regulation was just issued on October 8th, that does fall within the window where we will be facing the prospect of Congress trying to claw that back, to use the Congressional Review Act to stop that regulation coming forward. Let's go back to the hearing now. We're hearing another water-related question about affordability, and this is a hot topic. I'm glad it's getting the attention in the hearing it's getting.
I'd also add that you should need to be a voice within the administration as the budget is prepared and OMB makes decisions in support for the fund as well. It's certainly true that presidential budgets are not irrelevant, and it's useful if we start with a robust number that is beneficial to the country. Last question I'll ask is, I'm interested in what our country's doing. I'm involved in the national security aspects of my time in the Senate involves those things. What is there any role for EPA to play in the critical minerals world?
Yes, Senator. President Trump has expressed a desire of having an energy council. He wants there to be collaboration between different agencies of different levels of jurisdiction. That involves everything from permitting reform, which is one topic actually that I heard Senator Whitehouse reference earlier in his opening remarks. I believe that it is important for agencies to be working together, regardless of whether we are the lead agency or we have a different role to play of following another agency. But I look forward to any collaboration working with other agencies to do EPA's part.
Congressman Zeldin, thank you for taking my questions and responding.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you. Last but not least is someone who also has some big shoes to fill, as the former chairman of this committee was from the great state of Delaware. But I know that Senator Blunt Rochester is well up to the task, and we welcome her to the committee and welcome you to the questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you so much to you and the ranking member for the warm welcome. I'm excited to be on this committee. Senator Carper and I wear different types of shoes. I wear pumps. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude, though, to the former chairman of this committee, my friend and mentor, Senator Tom Carper, for his years of faithful service, not only to this committee, but also to our nation and to saving our planet. I'm proud to be able to be a member of this esteemed committee. And Mr. Zeldin, I appreciate your visit last week. And you clearly stated in your testimony that we must ensure that we protect our environment. And in our conversation, I shared with you the rich diversity of my state, from our farmers to city dwellers to our coastal communities and our environmental justice communities, and why the EPA is such an important and great partner to our state. I've, in my time in the House, prioritized clean air, clean drinking water, affordability of those things as well. And for us, it's crucial that we have the best candidate for the EPA administrator. So in our conversation, I was really pleased also that you earnestly acknowledged that climate change is real and that you are committed. You actually affirmatively, before I even got the question out, said you committed to following the science and letting that dictate the policies of the EPA. And as I said in my home state, we feel the impact of climate every single day. And as a former member of the House, I know we talked about the similarities in our district, low-lying, vulnerable to sea level rise, and it's critical to our coastal communities. How will you direct the EPA to help these communities like ours survive the rising sea levels and extreme weather brought on by the climate crisis?
Senator, this is a topic that involves multiple agencies working together. So EPA being able to do its part is incredibly important. EPA might not have the funding that the Army Corps of Engineers is bringing to a particular project as may be authorized by Congress. The Department of Interior might be working on a particular aspect of this under its jurisdiction. The collaboration between agencies is critical. The collaboration between agencies and Congress is going to be important as well. I think it also helps for I, as if confirmed as EPA administrator, to be traveling to a state like yours to see issues firsthand on the ground, especially when they emerge on at times little notice, sometimes which with far more notice, to be able to hear from people who have been working on these issues a long time, to be able to hear that feedback, to allow that feedback to inform my decision making and to bring that feedback with me to Washington, D.C. when I return from those trips, which
Thank
I look forward to, if invited, coming to visit your state with you.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of yes or no questions because I know time is limited. You stated that EPA's mission is to protect the health of the public and the environment. Is this still your position? Yes or no?
Yes.
Will you ensure EPA prioritizes policies that promote access to clean water? Yes or no?
Clean what, Senator?
Clean water.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. And as you know, many rural communities have old water infrastructure and rely on well water, particularly in Delaware, which creates significant water quality issues. How will you, your EPA, help these communities access effective solutions such as upgrades to stormwater infrastructure, watershed restoration, or water infiltration?
Senator, Congress has approached these issues in the past in certain creative ways. In some respects, it could be an aspect of congressionally directed spending. I've seen go to a particular community where they are able to mitigate an issue of water contamination, as we experienced in Suffolk County, where my congressional district was located and where we had multiple aspects of PFAS contamination. The first step is to be able to get access to drinking water. And even if that's providing bottled water, that's a partnership that starts with local leadership, where a state and federal government is asking, what can we do to assist? What's important is long-term mitigation. And what is so frustrating to the American public is when they see these issues lasting for 10, 20, 30 years and the ball's never moving in the right direction. I look forward to doing my part to work with your local communities to get these issues mitigated to whatever extent I can help.
You actually brought up for me something that was personal. We have communities that did not have access to clean drinking water in our state. And so it was important for us to work on that revolving state water fund, getting that water to those communities, but also the water affordability. And Senator Padilla mentioned the work on the LIHEAP for low income for water programs. I led that charge in the House side and would love to continue working again to make this a permanent program for those families. I will yield back and hopefully we have a second round of questions so that I can ask about soot particulate matter. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. And this does end the first round. I would say we had full participation in the committee, which we're going to expect at every meeting, right? And I am very pleased with that. I also, in the interest of not wanting to hurt a new member of my committee, neglected to welcome Senator Moran as a new member of this committee. So, well, a returning, well, that's why I didn't say anything, because you're returning. In any event, I didn't want to chance those hurt feelings, since mine have been hurt all day by denigrating my mountains, but we won't get into that any longer. So we're going to go to second round, and we'll do it in the same order as the folks that were here. Before I begin my round, I would like
go to the second round of questioning, and worth noting that one of the more controversial nominees, Pete Hegseth, who had the Defense Department, that committee was only allowed one round of questions. This is a less controversial nominee by far. And so we'll have two rounds of questions. So we'll learn more about Mr. Zeldin's views, his perspective. I have to say that just in general, if you contrast him to the administrators who came in under Trump 1, it's quite a stark difference. First of all, you had the first administrator, Scott Pruitt. We've already reminded everyone of his foibles that ultimately caused him to resign or be kicked out in disgrace as EPA administrator. You know, he came in as a very pugilistic, combative, anti-EPA tone, and not you know, a smoother presentation from Andrew Wheeler, who succeeded him. But Wheeler was a coal industry lobbyist and obviously came with a straightforward deregulatory agenda. Mr. Zeldin is not coming across that way at all. He's acquitting himself, I think, as the kind of person who's going to listen to all sides. He's concerned about funding, has already supported, to hear a Republican member ask him to defend budget requests, make aggressive budget requests in the name of, for the sake of clean water, which in effect means please fight within your own administration for this, which EPA administrators traditionally have done, but I'm not sure so sure that that happened under Scott Pruitt or even under Andrew Wheeler. But really interesting that his affect, his tone, his emotional intelligence for the issue of environmental protection is, I think, much more palatable, much more in step than maybe one might have expected. It's what I expected from him, knowing a little bit about his style and having seen him operate in the House before. But Sydney, what's your sense? He comes across, as we've said already, as a kind of a happy warrior, engaging in the public interest and civic duty. Obviously has a role he plays in the armed forces. He's in the Army Reserve and as a JAG officer. This is not an anti-government, anti-EPA personality that we're seeing at this table.
Yeah, and as someone who really has usually, right, my head's always down in the numbers, and to see these kinds of interactions, it almost lulls me into this sense of like, okay, maybe things will be all right, and we'll see how this goes, but also I know that there are going to be pressures coming from outside, right? There are going to be pressures coming from the Trump administration, and I'm just kind of waiting to see how the cards fall.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And some of the questions that have been asked, obviously he's been able to fudge and say, or at least I think it's a straightforward answer, but it doesn't really reveal what might be ahead of us down the road with respect to the environmental justice initiatives, funding for climate change issues. There was a pretty serious attack on climate. Even the mention of it or references to it in the first Trump administration, and we've seen no change in President-elect Trump's attitudes on this topic. He still does refer to it routinely as a hoax and talks about renewable energy sources as being unreliable and wants to drill, baby drill, and so forth, even though we're already the top energy producer in the world, as we've established earlier in today. But it's interesting that Mr. Zeldin, I think true to who he is as a public servant, this is the style he prefers to present to the world. We'll see what he has to do with respect to the president's agenda on the environment and the many requests he'll get from industry to loosen regulations. And we heard a lot about that on the Republican side, suggestions that there was overreach and overregulation on the part of EPA. Let's go back to Senator Capito.
Coordination with the past Trump administration, and it was initially championed by the Biden administration to deliver real results in cleaning up this area of our state. It was a true win-win. The Biden administration, for some reason, which we can't figure out, flip-flopped on this, and they just started putting more burdensome, costly, and a much slower cleanup process. So you're still having your acid mine drainage while we're getting hung up here. It threatens projects like Muddy Creek and discourages other communities from pursuing similar efforts to achieve real environmental remediation and benefits. Will you commit to me, working with me in the state, to try to reverse these counterproductive changes and cut the red tape and restore this for more cost-effective, but also better environmental results?
Yes, Chairman Capito, I know how much of a priority this is. You've been outspoken on this issue. It's my commitment to work with you as soon as, if confirmed, as soon as I'm in that position, I'd welcome that opportunity.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you again, Chairman. Mr. Zeldin, I have something of a life experience PhD in fossil fuel pressure politics, and they'll be coming after you hard, and they'll be feeling very entitled based on their political spending toward a Trump victory. I have two questions when you're faced with that. The first is that prominent voices in Trump world have been saying that it is important to traumatize EPA's workforce to drive them out. They've been saying that it's important to cut EPA's workforce by 2/3 or more, not just Washington, but the field, the entire organization. And they've been saying that it's important to destroy the professional civil service protections of EPA's workforce. How do you respond to those three threats?
Senator Whitehouse, as I've stated earlier, my desire, if confirmed as EPA administrator, is to increase productivity of the EPA. I want to be able to help lead this agency in a way that all of you on both sides of the aisle can be proud of, for us to be accountable and transparent. I want maximum collaboration, not just with Congress, but internally within the EPA. I've been hugely impressed with the level of talent stepping up to serve at EPA. And that is the pressure that I am feeling at this moment, is to bring out the best of EPA to make sure that we are fulfilling our mission of protecting public health and the environment.
You will not support executing on those three threats.
My commitment to you is exactly as I had stated, Senator Whitehouse, and I am not coming into this position with any threat. My position as I sit here is a promise, it is an obligation, and it is a commitment to do my part, to do the best job possible in leading the EPA to fulfill its mission in a way that follows its obligation under the law and is one that this committee can be proud of.
The second question that I have is that while you've made a lot of good and sound statements here today, it's one thing to say things in this environment, and it's another thing to stand by those guns when the pressure comes at you. And if you look at your past, if you look at your influence and advocacy work with American First Policy Institute and America First Works, the big donors have been pharma, the massive corporate lobby, Goldman Sachs, a Morgan Stanley fund, and a billionaire fracking CEO. We don't know who the rest of the donors are because AFPI keeps much of their donor list secret, but we do know of those. Your fellow board members at America First Works include the billionaire CEO fracker, the former CEO of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which I view as a very significant player in the fossil fuel funded climate denial armada, the successor to that Texas Public Policy Foundation CEO, and a third individual called the Chief of Intelligence and Research at that same, in my view, climate denial front group. In your political work, you've taken nearly $300,000 from the oil and gas industry back to 2007. You've had large campaign support from Koch Incorporated, which gave a total of about $60,000 when you count up all the contributions to PACs and campaign funds. David Koch himself maxed out to you, and Koch PAC gave $20,000 to your Lee PAC. In the wake of being so surrounded with so much corporate and fossil fuel influence, I want to give you two opportunities. One is to answer to me now, how is it that you will be able to separate yourself from the influence of these people and these interests when they come demanding things that they think they've earned politically? And I'll also turn that into a QFR so that you can, with a little bit more basis for reflection, make a more complete answer. So with that, over to you for your response, sir.
Senator, I don't need any extra time for reflection on that one. There is no person who has ever provided any level of support to me or anyone else who has any special influence with me. When I was in the Army, I wore around my dog tags the 7 Army values. The acronym is leadership: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. It is important for me to have always been able to approach this position with a clear conscience to make decisions that I can live with for my entire life. There is no dollar, large or small, that can influence the decisions that I make, who has access to me, and how I am ruling in my obligations under the law. Senator, I'm happy to enthusiastically answer that question on any day on the spot, and I would never need any extra amount of time of reflection.
Well, good luck standing up to these guys because they're going to come at you.
Thank you. I understand that a 5-minute break would be in our best interest. Would you like to do that now, or you want to keep going?
I'll take 5, I guess. Thank you, Senator.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
We'll come back in 5 minutes.
So while we're on break, again, I think Senator Whitehouse is going at the same contradiction that we're struggling with here, Sydney. We've been struggling with during the whole hearing. I say struggle because the gap between all the expectations that we would reasonably hold in the introduction of Mr. Zeldin as the EPA administrator, whose top task is to deregulate, and all the rhetoric we've heard from the Trump administration, not just the imaginary Department of Government Efficiency headed by Secretary Elon Musk, but also from the incoming OMB head, who is the person who was caught saying on tape by Politico, I think it was, that he feels his job is to put the entire civil service in a state of trauma, but EPA in particular. And now Mr. Whitehouse, Senator Whitehouse, underscoring the pressure that will be put on Mr. Zeldin, and the pressure presumably coming from the very top of the administration, from President-elect Trump himself, trying to make sense of what appears like a contradiction, a very strong anti-environmental, deregulatory emphasis coming from the president-elect and many who surround him. A mandate supposedly. We know it was not really a mandate in terms of the scale of the victory, but let's take their argument as at its face value, a mandate to reduce the size of government, to dramatically reduce, in particular, EPA, which has always been a target for conservative politicians when they come to power, because they hear from their constituents, meaning the companies that are concerned about being held accountable for pollution, for emissions, for enforcement actions against them. It really is a perplexing on the surface that Mr. Zeldin, on the one hand, can seem as committed to meeting achieving the mission of EPA as the most altruistic assessment of that mission might be defined, protecting the environment, protecting human health, making sure everyone has clean air, clean water, and so forth. Of course, the definition of that, is it the industry's definition of clean, in shorthand, the regulated sector's industry of that, definition of that, or is it the impartial public health and environmental experts at EPA, and will they be protected? Will the staff be held intact? We had Tim Whitehouse on earlier from Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, and obviously he has a clear understanding from all his many connections to the EPA workforce that there's trauma there now. People are really concerned. When I see Mr. Zeldin speaking, I don't know why they would be concerned, but when I see the rest of the Trump administration and their rhetoric, it seems like it's the opposite. What do you think people should make of this contradiction, Sydney? Even Senator Whitehouse said, "Good luck." They're coming at you.
I think I'm still trying to decide for myself. It's such. I just don't know how this is all going to play out, especially with seeing some of the answers that he's giving. It seems supportive where there's no real risk in support. Does that make sense? Where he's saying like, sure, I'm going to support a healthy and clean environment, but like you just said, what does that mean? Whose definition are we following? And just, I just don't know how all of this is gonna play out.
Yeah, no, it really is. It's interesting. I mean, when he's confirmed, and I think there's no question he's going to be confirmed, he may even get quite a bit of support from Democrats on this committee, unlike some other nominees where it's very much a partisan divide or where we just don't know yet. For example, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we don't know how that nomination process is going to unfold. We'll find out in a few weeks when the hearing is scheduled. But obviously, it's really difficult to know what this 17th confirmed administrator of EPA will really stand for. I don't think there's been an occasion where there's been more uncertainty about that. I remember back during the Bush administration, Bush 1 and Bush 2, there were lots of questions about what EPA administrators would do. And relative to Trump 1, those were moderate administrations, but wasn't really the case with Mr. Zeldin. He seems to be holding his own here and standing by his guns. We'll see what that means in the details, and that's where the devil is. Let's go back to the hearing.
Senator Graham mentioned China and India. He's exactly right. You never heard this from John Kerry, but the leader in the world in the last 20 years on reducing global emission was the United States of America. Okay? The bad guys, in terms of emission increases, look at China, through the roof. This is a fact. Now, I've asked some of the Biden administration EPA officials, hey, why do you think this happened? Why do you think we're the leader? It'd be great if you said it, because we are. And they would always come back and say, let's see, EPA regs? Wrong answer.
The sound is, obviously, they've turned off the microphones. I don't know how the senator's being picked up, but we'll come back in just a few minutes when the committee reconvenes.
Commitment to help us work on that large-scale LNG project, which will help continue these global emission reductions?
Senator, I'd welcome the opportunity, if confirmed, to be able to work with you on this and other issues.
Great. I have another map I want to show you. Real quick, you and I talked about this issue of leaded aviation fuel. That's a huge issue to my constituents, what we call avgas. We got it, an extension for Alaska and the FAA, given our pilot safety issues, our aviation safety issues. There was this congressman, I forget his name, from New Jersey. He tried to limit this. My view, he should be more focused on cleaning up New Jersey than worrying about aviation safety in Alaska. Can I get your commitment to work with me on this avgas issue as we discussed in my office?
Senator, As I gave you my commitment then, reiterate it here today for all your constituents to hear. We had a very long substantive conversation on a lot of topics that you're fighting for Alaska, and I welcome the opportunity to be able to work with you on all of that.
Great, thank you. Let me give you one final map and one final question. It's a little complicated. This is the American Medical Association study on life expectancy changes in America, okay? This was from 1980 to 2014. Purple and dark blue, that's where life expectancy changes happen the most, okay? Up to 13 years. Unfortunately, see yellow, red, certain places, there was a life expectancy decrease. That's mostly the opioid epidemic. My state led this. It led it because Alaska Natives, which is where most of these communities are, over about 20% of my population, started at a real low, lowest life expectancy. Then what happened on the North Slope, what happened out in the Aleutian Island chain, what happened in the Northwest Arctic borough, resource development happened. Oil and gas happened. Open up fisheries happened. Resource development happened, and people's lives increase on average by up to 13 years. So here's my quick issue. This is a matter of life and death in my state. And the indigenous people in particular, who I care deeply about, have benefited tremendously from resource development. President Biden comes in with his Secretary of Interior. She doesn't listen to Native people. They issued 68 executive orders to shut down resource development in my state, which is going to hurt people, hurt their life expectancy. So when we talk about all this stuff about, oh, we're against resource development, oil and gas, from my state, from my constituents, this is a matter of life and death, and it's brought gymnasiums and health clinics and water and sewer. So can I get your commitment to work with me on these issues on resource development that benefit the Native people tremendously of my state? The Biden administration is talking about, oh, environmental justice. This is environmental injustice when they shut down Alaska Native communities' opportunity to develop their resources. And, you know, their focus on minority communities, I think that's great, but they've had a big asterisk during 4 years of Biden and Secretary Haaland, not for Alaska Natives. And it's an outrage. This helps my communities. And can I get your commitment to work with the Alaska Native communities, indigenous communities of my state on this issue, on the other issues you talk about, contaminated lands, water and sewer. We have communities that don't have clean water and flush toilets. I really want your help on this. We didn't get the help from the Biden administration. They talked the big game, communities of color. They didn't care about the Alaska Native communities, and I need your help on this.
Understood, Senator. You have my commitment to work with you on this.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zeldin, I want to discuss another issue with you that's affected the Western United States significantly, especially Arizona on the Navajo Nation, and that's the issue of abandoned uranium mines. We have about 500 of them. The nation's been working to clean up these mines for decades now, but the bureaucratic process of the Superfund law has meant that very little progress has been made on this, and it contaminates water, and just the radiation itself causes cancer. One step which was taken during the last Trump administration was to establish a regional office called the Office of Mountains, Deserts, and Plains, which would focus on cutting through the bureaucracy and accelerating the cleanup of mines in the West. Senator Lummis and I introduced legislation last Congress, which passed this committee unanimously, called the Legacy Mine Cleanup Act, which would authorize the creation of the office and accelerate mine cleanup across the Western United States. So will you commit to having your team review the legislation quickly so we can then incorporate EPA's feedback before we introduce the bill this year?
Yes, Senator.
And will you commit to ensuring the issue of abandoned uranium mines remains a priority for the EPA?
Yes, Senator.
Well, thank you for that. And then one final thing I want to discuss with you is, and I know you've spoken about this during the hearing already today. I was not in the room, but my understanding is you talked about PFAS. And as we discussed in my office last week, groundwater is the backup source of drinking water for both Phoenix and Tucson. And it's in an aquifer mostly under the city of Tucson, where Gabby and I live. And this has become more critical, this backup water supply, as the drought conditions in the West has worsened. But especially the groundwater under Tucson in those aquifers have been contaminated with growing PFAS plumes. And the city had to shut down nearly 30 groundwater wells because the water exceeded EPA's drinking water limits. And to date, the city has spent more than $71 million on remediation costs and are in negotiations with EPA Region 9, with the Air Force, with the state, with Tucson Airport, and other private parties to resolve this. And throughout this process and spanning across presidential administrations, EPA Region 9 has been a consistent partner in addressing these challenging issues. So, Mr. Zeldin, if confirmed, will you commit to working with my team and the city of Tucson to address the Tucson PFAS contamination?
Yes, Senator.
So thank you, Mr. Zeldin. Thank you for spending the time. I know this has been a long process and a long hearing. It's great seeing your family here, and look forward to having the opportunity in the committee and eventually on the floor for the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Chairman Capito, for having this second round of questions. I appreciate it. And Congressman Zeldin, presuming that you get confirmed to be the EPA administrator, you're going to have to work to reestablish the credibility, reestablish the trust for the EPA, and that's going to involve a process of transparency and good faith action on the EPA's part. Part of what I expect you to bring back is accountability. President Biden's EPA had a $41.5 billion, billion with a B, program to carry out EV mandates and environmental justice. How many additional dollars went to the General and Inspector General's office to conduct oversight over those IRA funds that went out? Zero, none. Yeah, that's a problem when you're spending that kind of dollars. Can we have your commitment that you will look into this to make sure those dollars were spent appropriately, that the process was followed properly for all those dollars, and make sure that any dollars that were not spent appropriately, in fact, Senator Capito and I actually had a press conference on how some of these dollars were being distributed. But if they weren't being distributed, you'll work to claw back those taxpayer dollars?
Yes, Senator.
Great, thank you. We talked a little bit earlier also about the EV mandate. Part of what this IRA dollars were supposed to be pushing is this EV mandate. Of the 147 communities in my state that are classified as cities, 99 of them don't have a single EV charger. If you're living in communities like Bloomfield, Alliance, Valentine, you're 45 minutes from the nearest charging station. And in my state, EV adoption is like 2%, when nationally it's about 7%. And of course, the current mandate that the EPA is pursuing with their emission standards was to have 2/3 of all new vehicles being sold as EVs in the year 2032. That's just clearly not realistic. And again, as we discussed, we should allow American innovation to be able to help us reduce the impact on the environment, not have the administration pick one solution that they want to push. Do you commit to rolling back these out-of-touch mandates that are costly to Americans and dangerous to our energy grid, increase our reliance on our adversaries like the People's Republic of China?
Senator, it is my obligation, if confirmed, to be following my obligations under the law. And with regards to the Administrative Procedures Act, rules, laws set out that guide the way I answer that question. I'm not allowed to prejudge outcomes going into rulemaking to ensure that there is durability of any decision to be made at the end of the process, where my answer to that question could potentially be used against any type of a rule regulation that is made. I will tell you that I have heard concerns from you and many others in this chamber of how important it is to look at rules that are currently on the books. I don't sit before you with any type of announcement I'm able to make of any rules that are going to change upon confirmation. I will tell you that I will not prejudge outcomes. However, it is my commitment to follow my obligations under the laws set by Congress, to look at laws, decisions that have been made by the United States Supreme Court, and to make sure that we are pursuing common sense, pragmatic solutions that make sense to you, that you can defend when going back to the constituents that you fight so hard for from your home state. So I look forward to the opportunity of being able to make you proud, being able to make this entire committee, the chairman, proud, in hitting the ground running to do my part so that the EPA is being accountable to you as a senator and is accountable to your constituents as taxpayers and as Americans.
Right. Well, thank you, Congressman Zeldin. One of the things we also talked about was certainty. We talked about it in the context of the RVOs. But there's another area of certainty that we've talked about, and we need to continue to talk about. The Supreme Court's Sackett versus the EPA decision was a clear directive to narrow the scope of the federal jurisdiction on the Clean Waters Act. And here's just one of the things that just drives me nuts, because this has not just been a Biden administration. This happened under the Obama administration. The Clean Water Act over 50 times says navigable waters. Navigable waters means you can put a boat on it and go someplace. That's the Merriam-Webster definition in really broad terms. Clearly out of scope of what the Congress's intent was. And the decision in SAC was intended to provide clarity to producers. President Biden's WOTUS revisions have only confused it by talking about things like relatively permanent waters or unclear determinations on which waters are actually jurisdictional under law. Farmers and ranchers in Nebraska deserve better than an EPA taking years to decide the best way to regulate a ditch that might someday hold water. Do you plan on providing clear and durable waters of the U.S. guidance to producers as an administrator?
Senator, I believe that it's incredibly important for the EPA to provide clear and durable guidance as it relates to waters of the U.S. The Sackett decision is easy to understand for any of those property owners in your state, yet still they have questions as it relates to the rules and regulations that are on the books. It should be as clear as possible so that your people can understand without having to go hire an attorney or someone else to assist them with compliance and definitions.
Great. Well, again, I would just remind you that the Clean Water Act says navigable waters. It's a pretty plain English definition. Congress's intent could not have been more clear. And so I just remind you as you're going through that process to keep that in mind. Thank you very much, Congressman Zeldin.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again, and congratulations on your new position. And respectfully to my friend from Nebraska, there is no EV mandate. Doesn't exist. There is no EV mandate. It's not a mandate. It's a clean car standard, which is technology neutral, driven by American innovation and the need to protect our environment. So there is no mandate. I have to keep repeating that every time. So again, Congressman, Project 2025 proposes to eliminate the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance at the EPA. Do you agree with that proposal?
Senator, first off, I've never read any word of Project.
No, I'm not going to ask if you read it. But do you agree with the proposal to eliminate the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance at the EPA?
While that is something that I had never thought of before you're asking that question, no. It's an important function of the EPA, and we've had good extended conversations here about that topic during today's hearing, Senator.
Okay, so again, that just prompted the question, and the answer is a very good answer. Thank you. And on the EPA Clean Car Rule, it's projected to cut air pollution and prevent about 2,500 premature deaths in a single year. And over the life of it, it would obviously be tens of thousands of lives which are saved. And it would save drivers $46 billion in fuel costs, 15 billion barrels of oil that would not have to be used, and $6,000 over the life of the new vehicle. So if confirmed, are you planning to initiate a new rulemaking that could undermine those clean car standards?
Senator, if confirmed, I cannot sit before you and announce the initiation of any new rules. I have no announcements to make of rules that are going to change, and I plan on following my obligations under the law to ensure that throughout my tenure, if confirmed as EPA administrator, that I never prejudge outcomes heading into that process.
Okay, well, again, the savings are quite profound for American consumers' dollars in their pockets because of those much higher standards that don't require oil to be put into gasoline tanks, where we put about 70% of all the oil that we consume. In September, RFK Jr., the Health and Human Services nominee, went on the Dr. Phil show, and he said, quote, it's glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. It's the pesticides, it's atrazine, it's PFOAs, the forever chemicals. We're mass poisoning an entire generation of kids. Do you agree with that conclusion by RFK Jr. that these pesticides are mass poisoning the kids in our country?
Senator, I would welcome an opportunity to be able to read through all of the science and research that is being cited to support that conclusion, to be able to answer that question, following the review of that material. That's a review that I would need to I would need to engage in.
Yeah, it's obviously a very serious question, and it's one that hopefully would have the EPA working with HHS on a resolution of that issue. And in the 2.5 years since its passage, the Inflation Reduction Act has spurred the creation of 400,000 jobs and $420 billion in investment. 193 million of direct federal spending actually has gone to your former congressional district since 2022. So regardless of your stance on the bill back then, it did become law, and more than $68 billion has already been appropriated by the EPA from the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law. So are you going to ensure that EPA's ongoing implementation of grants, which have already been fairly awarded under existing laws like the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law, that they're impeded or are held up for political reasons?
Senator, my commitment is to follow the law as it relates to so much of what's getting discussed during this hearing. That is the obligation that motivates me. I have to be prepared to sit before this committee and be able to answer questions as far as it relates to funds that have gone out the door, not just currently, but also in the future. It's important for me to get my hands, my head all wrapped around everything that's been going out the door. Senator, I was concerned when there was a video a few weeks ago of a political appointee at the EPA who was talking about how they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic to distribute billions of dollars before Inauguration Day on Monday. I don't know at all what grants were being referenced with that repeated comment. It was also referenced in that video that they were tossing these gold bars off the Titanic with an eye towards getting themselves jobs from recipient NGOs. I don't know what any of that's about, but that's concerning to me. I want to be able to answer to you and to answer to every member of this committee that I'm being a good steward of the tax dollars.
Okay. Well, I just want to remind you that 80% of all of those grants have gone to Republican districts. So, so that's, I think, something that you should keep in mind in terms of, I would say, the impartiality of what those decisions have been at the EPA. And that's not just some ideological set of decisions if 80% of the money is going to red states. So I guess all I would say is I heard what you're saying, but I just hope you would resist the temptation to hold a witch hunt and to, break out the torches and the pitchforks to go after all these programs, because I think they must have been pretty fairly, given out if a blue presidency at the EPA, led to 80% of the money going to red districts. So is that I just want a presumption of innocence from you in terms of the decisions that were made on.
Right. Yes, Senator. I just want to be able to account to
I
you.
appreciate that, but I just need your
Yes, Senator.
your assurance that you do assume that most of this was done fairly.
Senator, I would only can assume. I can only assume, as I sit here, that upon review, that there will be. I will find out about all sorts of funding that went out the door that was following the law as written by Congress. All I'm saying is that I want to have the ability to sit before Chairman Capito, who's been very vocal on this issue, and be able to answer her question on a specific grant that she's spoken out about, or grants that committee members may speak about in the future. I just want to be in a position to account to all of you as far as the dollars being spent by EPA. I can only assume that there will be funding that will be from that review that will be in accordance with the law.
So I'm going to go to Senator Schiff. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zeldin, although California banned the installation of lead pipes in 1985, the average home in South Los Angeles is over 70 years old and more likely to contain corroded lead plumbing than other regions in the state. Lead in drinking water, particularly from old pipes and plumbing systems, is a significant public health threat, especially for children. Out of the 58 counties in the state of California, Fresno County has one of the largest numbers of children with high levels of lead in their blood. In 2016, nearly 14% of children tested in one Fresno neighborhood had reported high lead levels. 25% of schools in Fresno reported finding lead coming from their drinking water fountains. 40 homes had lead levels above the federal limit. In October, the EPA announced new final regulations requiring drinking water systems across the country to identify and replace all lead pipes within 10 years. Will you continue the EPA's work to help local communities like those in Fresno and in South Los Angeles replace lead pipes, particularly in many of these communities that are historically underserved?
I'll look forward to that opportunity to work with you, Senator, on this issue.
The EPA administers 12 geographic programs.
Seems like we have a problem at the C-SPAN end of things with our coverage here, so we'll be back in just a moment.
Yes, Senator. I know from our conversation yesterday how important this is to you. I look forward to getting more familiar about this issue, and that certainly can be my commitment as I sit here today, that if confirmed, I would welcome that opportunity to work with you on this issue and see what I could do to assist.
Thank you. Let me address a third critical issue affecting the health and well-being of millions of Californians, and that is air quality, not only in the aftermath of the ongoing wildfires, but also in the breadbasket of America. Unfortunately, we have some of the worst air quality in the nation, failing to meet federal health standards for both ozone and particulate pollution. This pollution directly impacts our families, our children, our communities. Last summer, residents of Fresno had just 10 days of healthy air, a stark reminder of the urgency of the situation. The EPA has long supported California's efforts to address this crisis through clean vehicle programs, regulatory actions, and strong enforcement. We have to continue this vital work, pushing for policies that protect public health and create a cleaner, healthier future for the San Joaquin Valley and all of California. Do you support investments like the ones that the EPA has made in the San Joaquin Valley to improve the quality of air there?
Senator, to the maximum extent possible under the law that I, if confirmed as EPA administrator, can assist on this and all the other issues that you referenced here today. I would welcome that opportunity to be able to work with you. As far as specific funding commitments, I need to make sure that I'm following my obligations under the laws Congress sets out as to how funding should be appropriated so that I can account to you afterwards. So moving forward, if there's any funding now and in the future that EPA has an obligation to distribute to help with this, I welcome that opportunity. It's possible that I might need to defer to Congress to be able to give me access to funding for investments in the future, if that's part of what you're referring to. Regardless, you have my commitment to work with you on this.
I appreciate it. Finally, one of the things that I found most striking as I have traveled around the state in the last couple of years, I expected, coming from an LA district, to get a full indoctrination on water and the competition between the cities and the farms over water, and I did. But what was more striking to me was just how many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in places like the Central Valley can't drink their own water. And here I'm not talking about lead, although the lead is a problem there. But the flooding of dairy waste ponds into water wells, the depletion of the aquifers resulting in manganese. There are just thousands of people told you can't drink your water, you can't bathe in your water. A lot of these communities don't have the resources to address it. And I would, if confirmed, I would want to work with you to do everything we can to make sure that everyone in the state of California and indeed the country has access to good, clean drinking water.
Yes, Senator, this is extremely important. No American should feel like a story they might hear about, read about of poverty in Iraq or Afghanistan. No American should feel like they're living in some third world country or some war-torn country. Every American should be able to access clean water, potable water, and that's something that I look forward to doing my part, if confirmed, to be able to work with you and everyone on the committee to ensure that we are delivering as a nation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, I am going to bring this down to a close here. My office has received numerous letters in support of Congressman Zeldin's nomination as EPA Administrator, with more continuing to arrive. The sources of these letters demonstrate the wide-ranging support of Congressman Zeldin's nomination, so I would ask unanimous consent to enter these 27 letters into the record for all to see. All right, we're unanimous. So I would like to thank you, Congressman Zeldin. I'd also make just several quick observations. It's obvious to me in the testimony and the questions that you took a lot of time and effort through you and your and the folks that were helping you to make sure that every member had access to you and had a conversation with you before you actually testified before the committee. I think that was definitely reflected in the tone and the substance that we saw here today. So I appreciate that. I know it's time consuming and difficult sometimes to get on everybody's schedule, but I think you did a magnificent job here. And so without further questions, I would like to thank you and thank your family for being here and for your participation. Senators who wish to submit without written questions for the record have until 5 p.m. Tomorrow, Friday, January 17th, to do so. The nominees' responses to those questions for the record are due back to the committee no later than 9 a.m. on Tuesday, day after inauguration, January 21st. With that, I do look very much forward to helping to shepherd you. I think you've done an excellent job here today. You will be an excellent administrator to the EPA, and I fully expect that your confirmation will be very positive. Thank you very much. Everybody enjoy the day. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the confirmation hearing for Lee Zeldin. I think it's pretty clear that he acquitted himself well in the formalities, the process here. He's certainly going to get an affirmative vote of confirmation on the Senate from this committee, I think, and and on the Senate floor. No real question about that. The details will mean everything, of course, and we know for certain that we'll know within the first few months where he comes down on questions such as the budget that will be submitted by the administration. Wasn't really a determinative factor last time around. People ignored the Trump administration's budgets. We'll see if they take that process more seriously next time around. But there will also be any number of decisions where he's really put himself out there now as saying, I'm going to try and make the whole committee happy. That's going to be a feat if he can manage that. He's vowed repeatedly to read. I'm encouraged by that. That's an admirable impulse. But specifically, he's agreed to read from sources that might not comport with, the slant that the Trump administration takes. He wants to learn about pesticides and the whole question of whether they're poisoning our children. He's agreed to clean water for everyone, clean air for everyone. And again, he wants to make not just the chair of the committee a Republican, the chairwoman, he wants to make everyone on the committee happy. So this is obviously a happy warrior. He's clearly proud to serve in the public interest. Several members brought up, Senator Whitehouse in particular, brought out some of his work in the past for conservative organizations that have very strong anti-climate change positioning, pro-fossil fuel positioning, but basically said, no, I'm going to enforce the law. I'm going to make sure that we continue to fund cleanup of lead service lines. I'm going to make sure that we continue to support appropriate initiatives, as he described it, for grants for climate change that have gone out. He did not buy the argument off the top of his head that these funds have been misspent or distributed in a political fashion or ideological fashion. He didn't bite on that when that was offered by a Republican senator. So again, it's well done in terms of getting through the confirmation process. I think all of us have grown cynical about confirmation processes really revealing too much. But he did lay out, I think, in a way that surprised me. He did lay out a position across many issues which would seem to depart from the overall thrust of the Trump administration to defund the government, to crack down on regulation, to unleash the economy and economic forces from the shackles of federal environmental law and regulation. And so, well, we have now, I think, a pretty clear set of criteria by which to evaluate what he'll actually do, because the devil will be in the details. Sydney, what are your takeaways?
I think one of the comments that was made earlier in the process from one of our participants saying that there is hope that he potentially will be a force for moderation compared to some of the more extreme views coming in from the Trump administration. And that's kind of what this hearing was looking like to me, at least. And so I'm hoping that that's actually what the case proves to be.
Yeah, no, it's pretty clear that, there were tough questions, particularly from the Democratic side on his fealty to the mission of what is, after all, the Environmental Protection Agency, not the Environmental Unleash Economic Prowess or Drill Baby Drill or Create Energy Dominance Agency. It's environmental protection. So we'll see how that sorts out. But thank you for joining. I want to thank all of the guests that we had on earlier today, and that includes Scott Faber from EWG, obviously Tim Whitehouse, who joined us from public employees for environmental responsibility, and you, Sydney, of course, and just also want to thank my colleague from, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through here to find my colleague from Earth Justice. He was enormously helpful in his commentary as well. Nathan, yeah. So thank you so much, folks, and we'll sign off here, and we'll see the details that the devil resides in coming our way before too long at EPA. So sorry, I stumbled on Nathan's name at the end, but there we go. Well, I thought it was fine. I mean, I think we know that we need more prep work and more things that we can bring into the program. So we need more engagement on that side to make sure that when topics come up, or when we have the opportunity to have guests come in, that we really can nail that down. But I thought thank you. I thought it went off without a hitch on our end, technically, except we had the camera